performing in Shakespeare plays very much. To date, he has taken a lead role in over 25 major productions locally and 5 abroad, and is poised to continue his journey as a practitioner and educator. So, without further ado, let us welcome Delon Matheson.
Is only mango tree with mango on it does get pelt. It's my mother I hear saying that, and you know she right. But that don't mean you're going to sit down there in panic and fright talking about I ain't going and bear no fruit. Don't be a coward. Get straight to the root. Don't sit down there in despair. Instead, make sure you bear. Let the tree of your life be laden with fruit, both green and ripe. Ripe so that they could see what they're pelting, and green so that they know it have more fruit coming. Don't fret that, because all who pelting, they have nothing on their tree growing. Let me tell you something. You see this thing about growth, it ain't no joke. Plenty people living out here without understanding their value and worth. All their talent, it buried under the dirt of fear, lack of faith, and folly, denying themselves of the opportunity to freedom and mirth completely. But you see this thing about producing fruit, it ain't no simple matter. It's real toil and agriculture. To get things growing and producing fruits of substance, you need sincere effort and diligence. Start by clearing the land from stones and rubble, things that could cause you to lose your balance and stumble. We need to clear the land of our mind from hindrances of every kind. Things like the bush of depression, low esteem and deflation. Prepare your soil and aerate so that within you, purpose could begin to activate. And when you see seedlings start to grow, recall every sound doctrine that you know, for wisdom is still the best fertilizer, and prayer and the word of God is the water. And when seedlings start to sprout, prop it up, encourage it, speak promise into being so that you can have your produce in the time of gleaning. And don't afraid parasites. You see all those things that come to drain the sap from your life? Old weed, overgrown greenery, people who only looking lush but contributing to misery. You see, weeds could kill. And if you let them, they will. They could literally tie up your whole life, have you in a mess and only suffering and strife. You see, and I'm not talking about the kind of weed you could smoke in a joint, but I'm talking about the ones that will overgrow you just to prove a point. So while you have a voice, make the choice. Deal with opposition. Don't stand up there playing nice and polite, asking questions with wickedness and demon. That is why you have cutlass and you have rake, so that you could cut down and scrape every parasite and blight. Things that pretending to wish you well, but the main goal is really to make your life a living hell. Untwine every bad vine. Allow goodness to grow in your mind. Prune and water. Pray and nurture. And when you see a start to flower, hold it down, partner. Because right there is the next problem. You see, people just get confused. They see a little flower and they get hyper. They don't understand that a flower is simply an indicator that fruit is a possibility, not that it's ripe and it's ready. That is why plenty people out here could never enjoy their fruit, because you're jumping about, boasting about you have flowers. Meanwhile, you're losing petals. Do not boast about God's blessings and bounty until you realize you start having fruit in plenty. Only then you could bask in the sunshine of His glory. It's only mango tree with mango on it does get pelt. Analyze the statement, for it's really a compliment. You see, all the fine fruit that you produce is what causing them to want to pelt and loot. But warn every wicked brute to find their own fruit. In the Bible, in the book of Psalms, have it there. If you're ever in a jam, it is very clear. Ignore wicked men. Keep God's law your delight. Meditate on it both day and night. Be like a tree planted by the river of water, yielding fruit that your leaves may never wither. And in all that you do, you may prosper. Just remember to have courage like reinforcement. For it's only mango tree with mango on it does get pelt.
What a presentation. I'm sure that everyone enjoyed that. I really love the use of the land, the metaphor, the land of our mind. And something else that jumped out at me was the fact that he referred to the greatest instructor ever. He went straight to the Bible, and all of us can relate to Psalm 1. Wonderful presentation. Well done. That's what we need to inspire us and to set us up to go right into our keynote speaker. Jennifer Doll is an educator with over 50 years experience at various levels within the education system in Trinidad and Tobago. During her illustrious career as an educator, Ms. Doll distinguished herself globally, regionally, and locally for her keen belief and advocacy of continuing professional development as the key to an educator's success. She's also a proponent of quality education for student learning and motivation. Now, with a career like that, this has taken her all over the world to international conferences. So what she's going to present today, she's well poised and well set to present to us. Her quest to be at the cutting edge of educational development has led her to research and be able to present in different places. And it's that research we are going to benefit from today. I'm going to let her speak. So without further ado, welcome Jennifer Doyle. We await your keynote presentation.
Jennifer? Okay, Dr. Shutt, it appears that Jennifer is having some technical difficulties.
Hello.
Yes?
Hello, are you
Jennifer?
hearing me?
Yes, Jennifer,
Yes,
we're
are you
hearing
hearing
you. We're hearing you.
Hello.
Yes, Jennifer, we're hearing
All
you. Are
right.
you hearing us?
Okay, great. Yes. Are you seeing the page,
Not yet.
the presentation?
Not as yet.
Something is not happening.
Okay, you should be able to share it with us now.
Okay. Okay, are you seeing it?
Yet.
Not as yet. Okay, Jennifer, don't worry. We'll sort it out.
Is it on share screen?
Yes, Jennifer, I'm gonna pull it up for you.
Yes.
So you should see it up on the screen now.
Yes, I
All right.
Yes, I am.
Okay. So you just let me know when you're ready.
Okay. All right, I'm ready. So the introduction has been done.
Yes, Jennifer, you can go ahead. You can start.
Okay. Well, colleagues, I recall traveling from an education conference in Bolzano. It's more about 5 years ago. And we engaged in a rich conversation with colleagues on the value of professional learning in moving our educators and in moving schools forward. It was really a rich discussion on a topic that I am really passionate about. Fast forward to this morning, and I am presenting on the very same topic that we discussed, well, more than 5 years ago. But with a different slant, with the improvements that have really taken place. It's a pleasure to present to you on a topic that I'm extremely passionate about, a topic that I have been living for more than 40 years, or the 50 years of my experience as an educator, and still living, having attained 70 plus, and still going strong in my belief that the key to the success of our educators being future ready. What do we really mean by future ready? I know there's much debate about exactly what is the future, when the future yesterday in place in education. That shift that is mandatory. It is no longer optional. A shift that is mandatory, a shift that is taking place in the entire business world. It is important for us to have our educators future ready. Being future ready simply means being open-minded about change, willing to adapt to new techniques. You are really willing to unlearn. You're willing to relearn, get there with new things. And important, you are willing to collaborate with your fellow educators to really come up with strategies, to come up with methodologies that would maximize the potential of our students and really make them future ready, the type of citizens that we really want. What do we really mean again by future ready? We have seen over the years that being future ready, there are changes, there are shifts taking place. If we go back to what 7, 8, when he wrote his text, 5 Minds for the Future, yes, when he wrote his text, 5 Minds for the Future, he spoke about the type of mind that our individuals, our citizens must possess. He indicated you must have a disciplined mind, an ethical mind, a creating mind, a synthesizing mind, and a respectful mind. If we fast forward again to what the research is telling us about being future ready, what type of minds you must have to be future ready, we can go to what the World Economic Forum indicated about 10 minds that you must have for the future, 10 skills that every student needs. And if the student needs them, we have to provide the students with the capacity. And therefore, we need to possess those skills as well to be able to transfer them to our students. So the the 10 skills have been identified, and around 20s, within a flash, we had changes again taking place. And if we look at the next slide, the critical skills that were spoken about in 2016, those were rearranged. 2015, let's look at what happened. As opposed to 2020, we still require at the top of the list complex problem-solving skills. But look what happened. In 2015, critical thinking was 4th on the list. In 2020, it became the second most important skill. Coordinating with others in 2015 was 2nd on the list, and it went down to about 5th or 6th in 2020. Note as well, emotional intelligence surfaced as a critical skill in 2020. Not only did the World Economic Forum express concern about these and the important skills. That framework also identified 3 different types of skills required: cognitive and metacognitive skills, which included critical thinking, creative thinking, learning to learn, self-regulation, social and emotional skills. That was another category. And those included empathy, self-efficacy, responsibility, and collaboration. Practical and physical skills were also identified by the OECD as critical, and these included using new information and communication and technology. Conducted in the United States, looking at over 2 million job advertisements. And from these job advertisements, yes, academic qualifications were required, but what surpassed and was mentioned in every application for in-demand digital skills were needed for the workplace. They needed you to be versed with artificial intelligence and machine learning, cloud computing, production management, and social media. Further, we are dealing with our students, and 5 skills were identified by the World Economic Forum as global citizenship and environmental stewardship. It is critical if these 5 skills are needed by our children, that we as adults, we as educators must be ready, must be prepared to impart, transfer these skills to our students. Get a mirror where you can see yourself, get some tool where you can see yourself, and let's go through some introspection. We are saying, mirror, mirror on the wall, am I future ready at all? All those skills that I have heard, where am I with those skills? So we are asking, we are looking at our mirror and we are asking ourselves, am I ready with those skills? Do I possess those skills? You answer to yourself. Do I possess those skills? Where am I with those skills? Can I identify my strengths and my weaknesses? Can I take one weakness, one area of weakness with my skill that I can work on? I can consistently set myself some targets, work on development of myself with that skill, and even share that with a friend, that target with a friend. Ask that friend, hold me accountable to improving that skill, improving myself in that skill. So whether you are a teacher, the librarian, the part of the admin staff, the principal, vice principal, it is critical that you look at yourself in that mirror, do that introspection, and ask yourself, because the power is within you as the individual. Your willingness, your attitude to change, to embrace change, will assist you in being future ready. What can we do now in terms of facilitating and ensuring professional learning and engagement? Several research studies which indicate that we know that professional learning is really the key to moving our educators forward. The key tiers have been identified by the Australian Institute of Teaching and School Leadership as relevant to, as relevant to professional learning. What does it look like? It must be collaborative. It must be individual. It can be individual. It can be face-to-face. It can be remote. It is required. Some countries mandate that professional learning of educators must take place to retain your license or your tenure in the field of education. We also indicated, the Institute also indicated it can be self-directed, facilitated, situated, personalized, it can be offered. All right, we know that there are several on the open market, there are several organizations, institutes that are offering intensive and sustained. It can be formal, it can be informal. You may get a certificate at the end, or you may have some sort of incentives. There are 5 trends that have been identified in professional learning. If we really are interested, it must be integrated or open. How do we really facilitate professional learning in an education environment? It can be done at the individual level. And at the individual level, you, as I indicated, as an individual, do your introspection, do it, and you can. Important as well as an individual, if you want to be future ready, you have to invest in yourself. You have to invest in your professional learning. You just can't sit back and say, my principal didn't send me, or invest in it. All right, colleagues, I know there are several of you who invest in your professional learning. You either go to webinars, you attend conferences, you do additional readings, you take part in several professional learning activities, and that is commendable. What must happen is that if we notice another individual who is lacking behind, we can pull that individual along with us and invite that individual in our classroom. Share ideas with that individual so that we can bring the individuals along. At the level of the school.
Ms. Doyle,
This,
just to interrupt for one moment, please. We have 5 minutes again to wrap up, okay?
okay, thank you. Yes, at the level of the school is very important. The school remains the hub of professional learning. And the principal, as the school leader, must set the right culture. We look at studies in Shanghai. We look at studies in the Dutch islands, and we see where principals, if you don't know it, does your curriculum officers, and you bring them on board. You invest in your librarian. You invest in working sessions for parents and really bringing them on board to understand this shift that is taking place. At the level of the district, we often get the complaint that our schools are not ready, are not technology ready. And that doesn't mean just having the technological equipment, but having your personnel utilizing the equipment in a meaningful way. being future ready as a school would also mean having the classroom environment suitable. We are building new schools, but yes, we are still building the classrooms, factory style, and not being able to really facilitate those collaborative skills, the interaction we want with our students in the classroom. So at the district level, you have some work to do. If we look at what was done by the Department of Education in the US, they developed a professional learning toolkit which they shared with principals and teachers to guide them along the way. And then at the national level, it ties in with what I said in terms of the resources available. So, colleagues, from the way we are thinking about professional learning, be it at the individual, school, district, or national level, we must have that strategic foresight. We can't just keep resorting. COVID happened and we had to do crisis management in terms of what we need to do. We must have that foresight. We must be able to engender certain approaches in terms of our professional learning and providing the resources and opportunities. We have to engage in 3 types of thinking: future thinking, system thinking, and exponential thinking. Colleagues, are we ready? Are we ready as an individual educator to move forward? I know that the work of educators can be very daunting. Principals can always say they are too busy to do professional learning. And I cringe when I hear that, because if we don't provide the opportunities and we don't provide the resources for our teachers, then our students suffer. Our teachers get burnt out, they frustrate our students, and we all end up being frustrated and complainers. Colleagues, when we think of it, we are talking about the future, but augmented reality, mixed reality, virtual reality, AI, are already with us in our classrooms. They're already with us in our classrooms. So the future is now. The future is now. We need to communicate. We need to establish partnerships. And we need to engage in continuous learning. Colleagues, I thank you for giving me the opportunity to have this short presentation. Change isn't waiting. It is not waiting for us. We need to change. We need to embrace that change if our students are truly to benefit in the classroom and become the digital citizens that we want them to become. I thank you for allowing me to do the presentation.
Thank you so very much for that. Well, it's a timely presentation. We needed to hear this, Mr. Dole. We needed to hear this. And I'm happy that you highlighted the skills that are necessary for us to have in order to be professionals. And what I also like, the fact that you reminded us that even when the skills were changed from 2015 to 2020, there were certain skills that stood out. For example, critical thinking, problem solving, creativity. No matter how we change and no matter how we shift skills, these remain. And as Caribbean people, all of us know how to problem solve. All of us know how to think critically.
Yeah.
So let us not stay back. Let us not stay in a little corner. Let us step forward and show we can do it. And you also highlighted the need to do it at individual level, school level, community level. national level. So we keep expanding. And that was a very good introduction to say how we can prepare people for the future, because our next session that's coming up is going to talk about micro credentialing. And this comes nicely off the back of what you just said, because we need to know how to be ready. We need to know how we're going to get those skills ready. So we would like to, for this session has a question and answer session, and I would like all of you to direct your questions to the chat, and Jonathan Barry would be spearheading that. So please, whatever questions you have, direct them to the chat. So our next speaker, Sherma Joseph, has been an accreditation officer at the Accreditation Council of Trinidad and Tobago since 2012, where she has also led in the role of Acting Director of Accreditation and Quality Enhancement. Ms. Joseph's lifelong passion for education took her across the education sector, from primary to tertiary level. Ms. Joseph's 35-year career is best exemplified by fulfilling experiences as a curriculum facilitator in both the public and private sectors, curriculum development specialist, testing and evaluation officer with responsibility for items, writing test development and standard settings for national tests in Trinidad and Tobago, textbook evaluator and assistant to the regional coordinator for the pre-service teacher training programs in Trinidad and Tobago. Let us welcome Sherma Joseph as she helps us to understand more about micro-credentialing.
Sorry about that. My video cannot be started at this time. Thank you, Ms. Doyle. Lovely to see you. And our presentations are definitely very well linked. I'd like to thank all of you for being here. It's not on yet. Okay, that's okay. And when I saw the topic, I thought, wow, this is such a broad topic. It's so relevant. Let me see how I would be able to take you through in 30 minutes some of what I am thinking about micro-credentialing. And to do that, thought to have a few focuses in defining the term micro-credential, quality assuring micro-credentials, because as you would see that my present day job, that's what I call it, is in quality assurance of higher education. Building 21st century skills and the value of qualification frameworks in this whole discussion of micro-credentials and some possibilities. So what are micro-credentials? I remember the first time, and I didn't know the term micro-credentials. It was probably called short course then. I would say about 2009 is my first recollection of me doing a micro-credential. And it was to do with development of learning and so on, and development of societies in small and developing states, run by, I can't even remember the organization. But these courses are short, and they really focus on skills and knowledge and emerging practices. They are stackable, or they may be stackable, and they may also provide a pathway to certificate or a full degree now or whenever the participant is ready. Sorry, right, good. UNESCO has defined, and you know, this is the fourth definition. UNESCO has defined micro-credentials, and I want to read it because there are so many points in here. It's a record of focused learning achievement, verified what the learner knows, understands, and can do. This matters further down when we look at the qualifications framework relevant to Trinidad and Tobago, and which is quite similar in its thrust to other qualifications frameworks. And it includes an assessment based on clearly defined standards and is awarded by a trusted provider. So the question is, how do you determine trust? It has standalone value and may also contribute to a complement other micro-credentials or macro-credentials, meaning terminal qualifications, including through recognition of prior learning. And it meets the standards required by relevant quality assurance. Therefore, UNESCO is admitting that in order to provide this element of trust, it must satisfy the requirements of the quality assurance agency. So what is the value of micro-credentials for teachers in particular? Because this is the focus of this group. The month in 2017 states that rather, and this is a direct quote, that micro-credentials are appealing because they break down complex instructional skills into fundamental parts that are bite-sized, and that teachers can choose which skill or which parts of a skill would benefit their professional practice, and then they can demonstrate their competency by providing evidence of what they know and they can do. I keep stressing the can-do element of the interaction in the micro-credential. Quality matters. We would like to think that if I have done a qualification, and let me not say qualification, some sort of learning endeavor, even a micro-credential, then it must be of high quality. How do we determine that it's of a high quality? Is it portable? Can I carry it across borders? Can it be transferred to a different sector? Can I transfer it to a terminal qualification? Is it industry focused and in demand? Therefore, can it add to my job prospect? Is it quality assured? And is it assessed? Now, I am a fan of, and you'll see there's a slide just devoted to some of my fan websites. In terms of, I'm very interested, and I tell people I troll through Coursera and Call and Udemy and so on and edX routinely. And what you've realized is that the two tracks the most of their courses. You can do it to get a certificate of participation, or you can pay, let's say on Coursera, $40 US and get a certificate. And it will be part of, and you can join an entire suite that may be accumulated to a terminal qualification or a significant part thereof. So quality matters. There's an external quality assurance viewpoint of micro-credentials. Are they stackable, non-stackable, or both? So the micro-credential will have to be very clearly stated in terms of its scope, the integrity, the fidelity to terminal qualifications. This matters when we come to the national qualifications frameworks or qualifications frameworks. The design, is it online or in person? I settled on online examples because of the nature of this body. But there could be a micro-credential or a short course that is in person. What are the standards related to micro-credentialing? Are there fees attached? Is it cross-border? At what level is this micro-credential pitched? What is the support for learning, and who is staffing? Who is the especially academic staff on this micro-credential? And we can look at the case of ENQA, which is the European Association of Quality Assurance in Higher Education. And ENQA is a conglomeration of a number of about 4 or 5 European external quality assurance agencies. And what they have looked at is that there is this drive for flexible, inclusive learning opportunities. My camera is still disabled. Micro-credentials, according to ENQA, are loosely defined as the record of learning outcomes that a learner has acquired following a small volume of learning. They do not really define what they mean as small volume, but a small volume of learning. What we do recognize is that ENQA does not, and UNESCO does too, ENQA does not make a distinction between short and professional course and micro-credential. ENQA says, as long as it's a short, fairly small volume of learning, it is a micro-credential, right? So this is in Europe. We would need in the Caribbean or in our fraternity, if we choose to separate it as UNESCO has done, we would need to decide what are our definitions. The learning outcomes will have to be assessed against transparent or fairly defined criteria, which is standard for education, to provide the learner with specific knowledge, skills, and competencies that respond to societal, personal, cultural, or local labor market needs. Micro-credentials are owned by the learner and can be shared and are portable. So that's what ENQA is saying they are. They, as I said before, they include any short educational endeavor. There's a concern for the integrity of the program development, because what we have been finding is that we have providers who choose to, you have a bachelor's in education, let us say, and we would like to do a micro-credential. They take the course, let's, for example, say school development and planning, and take a chunk of that course and call it a micro-credential. And the question is that really a micro-credential, or is it a module of a program? ENQA is also very concerned with transferability. Is it stackable or non-stackable? The participant must be made aware of all the scope and function of the micro-credential that they're going to engage in. If it's non-stackable and the participant has decided that they really would like credit for this micro-credential once completed, and they think it's stackable, then there's a problem, because they can't use it past this point. So the public, the participants, must be aware. Viewpoints from the literature. I don't want us walking away from this and thinking that micro-credentials will solve all our ills, and that there are no naysayers. There are some naysayers for micro-credentialing. Bailey and Belfield speak about there being no statistical significant impact of stackable credentials on wages. So it does not really impact on someone's wage. Sorry, Ostelu, sorry, that name always gets me. Some 41% of graduates with short-term certificates were unemployed, and those who were employed, 39% reported that their job was not related to their credential. So we can say it's possible that a stackable micro-credential doesn't matter. However, Baum et al., most studies using national survey data on adults show that those who have completed certificates of any length 10 to 20% more, earn 10 to 20% more in labor market than high school graduates. So what we can say is that yes, there is an effect. What is that effect and how we can make that effect work for us as teachers is the question. Wheelahan and Moody in 2022, and I find that their writing is very, I don't want to say unbalanced, but their writing sways towards being critical of micro-credentials. So we need to pay attention to Wheelahan and Moody. And they say, micro-credentials raise several problems. They seek to change the supply of educational qualifications or credentials to solve a problem of demand for labor. And they reorient higher education from educational purposes to employment purposes. And I think we need to guard ourselves against that. It is not just racking up a lot of micro-credentials and saying, I'm qualified. And therefore, I need employment. But it's more about engaging in the skills, knowledge, and behaviors to ensure that the educational system improves. Okay? So what is the usefulness of micro-credentials in all of that? We can look at micro-credentials for recertification. Now, this is an important topic because within the Caribbean, I think, save and except for Jamaica, teaching is not licensed. Therefore, the recertification or certification at all may be a moot point. And the more I thought about it for teachers, in the absence of licensure, what do we do? And Ms. Doyle touched on it a bit when she was speaking about what happens at schools and individuals, and I will go into it soon. We can look at retooling, using micro-credentials for retooling, and I use that a lot in my practice. Sometimes I register for micro-credential, not so much for the certificate, but to really see what's new. Or to get a different perspective. I tell people I am a UE graduate. UE literally, let's say 75, 80% of my higher education has been for the University of West Indies, St. Augustine. Therefore, if I see a micro-credential being run by University of Miami, I'm going to take it, even if it's in a field that I have spent a lot of time in, because I would like to see what is University of Miami saying about the same thing. Staff and professional development. Ms. Doyle spoke about that. We can really seek to use micro-credentials to improve what our staff knows and is able to do. And also individuals can seek to their own professional development. Remuneration increments. Now, teachers in Trinidad are always, how should I put it? It's a huge part of conversation, increments. Is it an increment? Do we get an increment because we've survived one more year of the classroom? Or shouldn't there be remuneration based on not only performance, but some sort of added qualification that has been self-directed? Promotion, similarly so. When we look at staff performance, performance management, Is self-directed learning part of our getting our box 4 and 5 and all of that? Professional development units. Can we use these PDUs that are calculated based on the time spent within the micro-credential or any kind of short course? Can we accumulate those for some sort of credit? How can micro-credentials be used for a higher level program, education program? If I've done 10 micro-credentials, does it equate in a particular area? Does it equate to getting credit for one course of a higher level program? Alignment with teacher professionalization standards. We do not have those yet. That will come again with licensure. And all of this, I think for me, the greatest usefulness is in building this community of professional practitioners. I tell people my last 3 years in the classroom was one of my most rewarding stays in the classroom. I love teaching, but you know what happened? I was put to teach a second year class. So children between 6 to, let us say, 7, 8. And I was put to teach. I probably had like 15, 20 years service by then, but I'd never taught at that level, although I had taught at the early childhood, early childhood care and education level. And I was put to teach with a very vibrant teacher who had spent most of her years at that level. And we team teach. So we would switch class, we would collaborate in what we were going to teach. If I was buying classroom equipment, I would buy for her class. So the classes were duplicates, but approximate in terms of our personal energies were still displayed in the classroom. And that was my most productive 3 years. And that sold me on the whole notion of this community of professional practice. Let's switch gears a little bit. One of the points that your theme would like raised is also, okay, good. I think I can put my camera on now. No, still not. Okay. Is the whole notion of 21st century skills. Micro-credentials, high quality ones, allow teachers to show proficiency in job-embedded discrete skills or competency by submitting evidence that is then assessed against defined evaluation criteria. When embedded as part of a comprehensive system of professional learning, micro-credentials can empower teachers to learn and demonstrate timely, relevant knowledge and skills that immediately help them in their classroom and in the career. But what are these skills specifically? We can find some explanation in the whole notion of 21st century skills, which are, it's a concept for the knowledge, skills, and attitudes citizens need to be able to fully participate in and contribute to the knowledge of society. So it's about societal development. It's not about self-actualization. It's more about transformation of the society. It's very postmodernistic. This need is mostly attributed to the changes in society, and more particularly to rapid development of technology and its impact on the way people live, work, and learn. And Ms. Doyle just now, she spoke about some of the skills, and it is supported here, that these skills are collaboration, communication, ICT literacy, social and cultural competencies. So it centers more around what we will call the social emotional learning skills, rather than knowledge and understanding or application. And qualifications frameworks mention these in this way. So I'm going to switch again to qualifications frameworks. Qualifications frameworks, and this may be new to some of you. Qualifications frameworks are instruments for the development, classification, and recognition of skills, knowledge, and competencies, along with a continuum of agreed levels. External quality assurance agencies around the world have published qualifications frameworks. The CARICOM qualifications framework was approved in 2012. In 2012, or 2011 even, the Accreditation Council of Trinidad and Tobago, because it's enshrined in the act that governs the Accreditation Council, Chapter 3906, was bound to develop, they called it a unified credit framework. We now have a national qualifications framework of Trinidad and Tobago NQFTT, and it's a communications and reforming framework that represents both academic and technical vocational educational endeavors. It's communications because we looked at what exists in our context, Trinidad and Tobago, but we also asked the question, what do we need to propel us towards our people acquiring these 21st century skills? And how can our programs seek to ensure through direct teaching, through activities, that this is so? So it was developed by the Accreditation Council in collaboration with the National Training Agency of Trinidad and Tobago over a 9-year period. It was approved in 2020 by the Ministry of Education, Trinidad and Tobago, and forms part of the National Development Strategy 2016-2023 and the Education Policy 2017 to 2020. I think it's supposed to be 2016-2030. Sorry about that. I feel I've put this time instead of another time. So the structure of the NQFTT, it's on our website. I can put a link later into the chat for the NQFTT, so you can get to see the abridged version of the documentation. And the outcomes in the NQFTT matrix spans 5 different areas of competence, areas of learning. It was never defined what these 5 areas, what is the umbrella term for these 5 areas, because we could never come up with it. But it's a 10-level framework that works from 4 levels of certificate to the doctoral level. And it offers outcomes in each of these 5 areas of learning, areas of understanding, areas of endeavor, whichever one you would like to use. I've put knowledge and understanding and application and practice in green. It's not expressed like that in the framework, in green, because these are the areas when we did an analysis of a sample of programs across a number of institutions that exist today. These are some of the, sorry, I'm trying to get my time. Okay. Oh. Okay. These are already enshrined. It is the 3 columns to the right that programs are deficient, and these are the social emotional skill learning areas. So therefore, we have to look at this, and it matters for micro-credentials because, sorry, let me go make this point and then go forward. Because the micro-credentials, how are we sure that someone with a short program, a short course, is developing these valid skills that are the central part of our 21st century skills? This becomes very, very clear. And then we have the Sustainable Development Goals. I think everyone is very familiar with the SDGs. There are 17 of them that really, and they're supposed to be achieved by 2030, which is 6 years from now. Are we there yet? Have we gone, because they have been, in essence, more than, since 2015. So therefore, we are more than halfway in the period, the duration in which the skills were supposed to be achieved. Are we there yet? One of the things I've noted is that in a lot of literature, people take skills. So they take skill 1, which is poverty alleviation. They take SDG 17. They take SDG 4. But a system and an action cannot be relevant only to one skill, because the skills are collective and cohesive, they are interconnected, and therefore quality education occurs in contexts, and these contexts are layered and they are complex. SDG 4, I'm going to focus on it here because this is where I saw us. It went to girls and boys, equal access, gender disparities, and I thought, where are we? Then it went on to learners acquiring knowledge, skills needed, and I'm like, okay, but how are these learners going to acquire knowledge and skills? They can acquire it in some homes through the action of the home. But many of our children will acquire the skills and knowledge from us, the teacher. And I did not see us. And then finally, the last action on SDG 4 said, by 2030, substantially increase the supply of qualified teachers through international cooperation, and Ms. Doyle mentioned that, for teacher training in developed countries, especially least developed countries and small island developing states, the SIDS. And this is where micro-credentials can help. So in order to do that, how can we increase this supply of not teachers, not any old teacher, but qualified teacher, qualified, quality teacher, high quality teacher, high quality skills, knowledge, and behavior. Teacher professionalism and professionalization. Hargreaves in 2000 talks about professionalism, which is being a professional. So we have a lot of codes of conduct and all sorts of things like that. But then there is professionalization, which speaks to how this group is viewed and compared to other established professional sets of workers like doctors and lawyers. And when I came into I started in the government sector in 1990, and we were talking about that. And we are still talking about teachers as professionals, which speaks to the whole notion of, the first one is more about self-efficacy, but professionalization is commingled with this whole notion of the general efficacious behaviors of teachers as a group. So Hargreaves says that there are 4 phases of professionalism, and I highlighted the last phase because I really want us to be there. I really want us to be in this post-modern age of professionalism, professional development. And I don't want us to go too far and have a huge discussion right with me now. We can probably do it after. In which age, which phase are we in? But the question is more, how can micro-credentials propel us to this 4th phase? So Ms. Doyle, again, she spoke about this. we can look at responses. There's a systemic response. Ministries, departments, divisions of education, the government. All right. How is the government arranging to have this professionalism use of micro-credentials? I've never been a good fan of waiting for ministries and governments and so on. And I always felt that unions and professional bodies have a huge role to play in this endeavor. In Trinidad and Tobago, the Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association represents primary and secondary school teachers. I'm not sure that they represent ECC student teachers as yet. I know there was a thrust towards it. I'm not sure what happened with it. But this union in particular also puts itself forward as a professional body. This is a time we can help. This is a time when we can say, let's use micro-credentials. But it's the how. Districts and pockets. I put pockets because there was a time districts were developed, were further divided into pockets.
Ms. Joseph,
yes, 5
could
more
I
minutes?
interrupt you? Yes.
No problem. I'm trying to go quick. Yeah. I think I can. Yeah, I can do it. Interest groups, external stakeholders. I am, how should I put it? An advocate for parents as stakeholders. Some of my most fruitful times when I was in the classroom has been with parents, in terms of them offering me support through advice. And I'm saying advice. I always taught in schools where the children did not come from how should I put it? Professional homes. So they would offer me advice from their viewpoint, and it was always spot on. Miss, if you just teach this a little bit more, and how about if you, and they can advocate for us. They can tell us, from their viewpoint, what do we need to do? Requirements for continued employment. And I think of the denominational boards. I'm going to make a fairly controversial statement. A teacher coming out of a Bachelor of Education degree ought not to be just placed in a classroom. There should be some more control over the development of the teacher. The denominational boards, the teachers in the government secular schools, it is harder to regulate this. But certainly with denominational boards, they can make a statement that, listen, once you've been employed, you need to do these courses. These micro-credentials that will help. We will work with you. And this is where it gets to the school and classroom adaptations. Study groups. Formally organized and informally developed professional learning groups or communities. These cannot be mandated by the government. These are germane to different contexts. Professional memberships. It is vastly important that we as professionals talk and commune with other professionals. Conferences, peer teaching. I spoke already about my experience with that, peer teaching, and individuals as professionals. It is not only that the school and the principal, but the individual teacher as a professional can seek to improve and therefore improve his or her efficacious behaviors. So, how do you produce? This was a question long before high quality micro-credentials. It must meet the criteria and standards of the external quality assurance agencies or the Ministry of Education, wherever the responsibility lies. There must be policies and procedures regarding the offer of micro-credentials, the development of micro-credentials, the internal approvals for them. How relevant are they to the context? Is there stakeholder analysis and acceptance of the microcredential? That must be said. And some possibilities. And I think that's probably almost my last slide. Some possibilities. No. Again, I'm a fan. I just only found the first one, the National Education Association. This is which is a American organization with a bank of certification. I am moving my way through it, but there are about 20 areas, one of them being assessment, literacy, and so on. So you can look. All of these are clickable links, so you can see it after. Coursera, the link I've put there is a specific course in teacher social emotional learning. edX, another one of my my favorites. Harvard Online traditionally has been, there are no free courses that I can think of, so you might have to spend some money. Commonwealth of Learning, this is generally free. And then there's Udemy. So what's next? What can we do? There must be rigorous external and school quality assurance systems. There must be relations to national or regional qualifications and credit frameworks. Better capture of the different types of programs and courses in trace and cohort studies, because we would need to know, this microcredential has been run. Has it been beneficial to our system? Have we seen any gains? Staff and professional development for design, development, and implementation and support in the absence of licensure for teachers. If there is no licensure for teachers, therefore, it is that staff and professional development action that becomes inbuilt to ensure that it is quality. Equity and access by various constituents. It's not some teachers get to do the microcredential and some don't. And finally, we must develop an ecosystem. This ecosystem is part and parcel of the professional learning community and groups, and it will be able to ensure that there's consistency across the sector. With that, I've left you some readings. And with that, I say thank you.
Oh, wow. You are thanking us, but we should be thanking you. That was a really, really thought-provoking, highly thought-provoking presentation. And there's so much that we have gained from that. What I like, the way you tied your introduction to the keynote and show how both of them are related and interrelated on different levels. I also like the stress you put on quality. Now, quality is an age-old issue in education. For years, we have been talking about quality. I remember the times when teachers were afraid, researchers were afraid to touch quality because it was such a contentious issue. But not because it's contentious means that we must throw it aside. Well done for highlighting the importance of quality and how we should engage in knowledge, skills, and social participation. And I noticed you had in bracket citizenship. That is quite good. And thanks too for letting us see the usefulness of micro-credentialing. And even though we can see its usefulness, you still highlight from the literature areas that people consider not too useful. And you even apply that in your own context. So it's for us to, as educators, to really sift through the rubble of issues, sift them through and see what's good for us. But what really jumped out at me too, you made the difference between professionalism and professionalization. You also talked about high quality versus highly qualified. And I would always strongly contend that there are educators out there who have never set foot in a training institution, and they're head and shoulders above some of those who have done it. So these are areas that we ought to take on board. These are areas that we ought to look into and see how best we can utilize those people. My favorite of all, as a means to take us forward into this issue, is peer teaching. Peer teaching, exceptionally strong. And I remember back in my school in Montserrat, we didn't know about micro-credentialing. We didn't know about all of this, but we use peer teaching, peer tutoring, not just among ourselves, but among the students. Very, very powerful tool. So thanks a lot. I know it was a lot to push into 30 minutes, because a topic like this, we could go on and on and on and on. But well done for highlighting the main points. Well done for directing our attention of where we should go and how we should get there. And well done for noting this would be an ongoing issue. You cannot draw the line under it here. We need to be always addressing it, because there's merit and there's demerit. So let us look at what we need and run with it. And always, as educators, be ready to do revisions, be ready to revisit, be ready to take a back step, be ready to analyze, and be ready to move forward. Thank you so much, Sherma Joseph. Thanks.
You're welcome.
We will now go into our Q&A, and Anderson.
Thank you.
Anderson is ready.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shutt, and thank you so much to Ms. Joseph for that really enlightening presentation. We do have a few questions for you, and I hope you could answer them. But before we get into that, I must remind persons, if they have any questions, please put it in the question and answer section. You should be seeing that on your screen. So please type the questions in the question and answer, and we'll get to them as quickly as we can. We can only take a few questions because we do have another presentation right after this. So the first question to you, Ms. Joseph, one person has asked, how significant are digital badges in micro-credentials? So can you answer that for Ms. Worrell?
How significant? They are significant. It depends on what you want. From my own practice, sometimes I don't go into the micro-credential to get a badge or anything like that. I just want to see. But if it is that your digital badge is your proof that you've completed a certain level of competence, because remember the micro-credentials can be anywhere from level 1 to level 10. And you want to prove that I have done a level 10, meaning a doctoral level micro-credential, then certainly the badge becomes very important. So it's about purpose. So they are very, very important. It may not be, it's sometimes important to some people and not important to others. I hope that answers your question.
Good. Okay, so Ms. Worrell, I trust that answers your question as well. All right, so I'm moving on to another one, coming from Ms. Maureen Ryan. And the question is, how can the teachers' competencies in using micro-credentials to improve students' learning be assessed?
Okay, that will, again, that's a systematic and school systemic response. I have been thinking about it, and I'm not so sure that I would like to suggest that someone coming off the street with 50 micro-credentials can come into a classroom, because the question is, especially micro-credentials that are built totally online with no practicums and so on, because we cannot assure that the person has built the capacity for those, let us say, soft skills, which is really the social emotional learning dimension. We don't know that they can collaborate. I can write a paper about collaboration, but that doesn't mean I can collaborate. So in answer to your question, how can we assess them? It will have to be through mentorship. Mentorship. So how should I put it? You are going to have to look at some milestones. Let me use it that way. One, the point of teaching is that the children learn. Can we do a study of this teacher or these groups of teachers before their performance and their children's performance, before micro-credentials, during micro-credentials, and post micro-credentialing? And if we can look at that, then we can make a statement. I would not like you to say that this one teacher, and looking at this one teacher and saying, oh, assessment. Because if we don't have a micro-credential built in, so how are we going to be using that for, let's say, performance management and performance appraisal? That might be fraught with legal implications. But we can look at the system, and when I say system, it can be low-level system in terms of this school. It may not be the system in terms of the whole Ministry of Education. So yes, it can be done, but it will have to be multifaceted with a number of different measures that will have to be applied. But it cannot be just looking at whether the students learn or not, because the teacher doing a micro-credential, there's so many other factors that could be impacting on the student's performance. Ms. Ryan, I hope that's an answer for you.
All right, so moving right along to another question quickly. Another attendee is asking about your views about licenses for teachers in the Caribbean, and what are the pros and cons of that?
If we are to move, and I want to use non-emotional terms. You see, if we introduce licenses for teaching, we are making some statements about the professionalism and professionalization of the whole body of teachers. So I say yes. Licenses are good in terms of I can, although I'm no longer in the classroom, I can still go and sit the exam or whatever that is a requirement for the license and get my teaching license. So whenever I choose, I can come back into the classroom. That's how licenses could work. Licenses also, think about, I tell people this all the time. Teaching, I like to think of teaching as law or medicine. Would you go to a doctor or dentist that has no license? So why are we continuing to have teaching unlicensed? Because it speaks to a lack of regulation. Some years ago, we would have done a paper, can't even remember where, it's been some time, and we were looking at standards for teaching and teachers. And it's astonishing that in the world, in the global north, there are standards for teachers. We belong to the global south. And because I tell people, Trinidad and Tobago, sorry for everybody else, Trinidad and Tobago belongs to the global south. But we have the resources that are resources and some viewpoints that are similar to the global north. So why resisting some other endeavors that are for the global north? We need to look at the global north, see what they're doing, contextualize it. What someone said to me, steal, feel, and make it real, and come back to it. So yes, I do agree with licenses. If you're going to do licensure, I cannot see that we will say everybody will have to be licensed by 2030. It might be that some people will be outside of the limit for it. Let us say there's a teacher who is retiring in the next 2 years. Why mandate that teacher reasonably to become licensed? And then there's also the other issue of grandfathering, which is a legal term. If the decision has been made that teachers should be licensed, the teachers who have been confirmed and predate that decision, can we force them to be licensed? Is that fraught with legal action? But yes, I am on the side of licensing, because as we move towards, sorry, I'm on the side of licensure as we move towards professionalization of this sector. Not a very popular viewpoint.
Thank you, Ms. Joseph. I am asking Ms. Grant, Tisha Noel Grant. I know we are just deviating a little bit from me asking the question, but I know Ms. Grant has a question she wants to ask verbally. So Ms. Grant, Tisha Noel Grant, Mrs. Grant, sorry.
Actually, good morning, everyone. My question was answered. I saw somebody put it in the Q&A chat, so it was already answered. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you very much. And the last one will be from Mrs. Clark, Craig Clark. Feel free. Go ahead. Mrs. Clark? Okay, so while we're waiting on that, Ms. Joseph, we have another question about how is the quality control of micro-credentials measured?
Sorry, I don't understand. What do you mean? The criterion standards?
I'm seeing here the question is, how is the quality control of micro that comes from Mr. Bernard Richardson in terms of the measurement of the micro credentials, quality control. That's what I'm seeing here.
I'm trying to think what do you mean by quality control. That's why. See, quality control is a term that's used in industry. When I say industry, factories and so on. So quality assurance and quality management is different from quality control. That's what I'm asking. What do you mean?
Okay.
But I can talk about quality assurance. Okay, there are criteria. Okay, quality assurance works with criteria and standards. In some places you have key elements and so on, but they all boil down to this. It's areas. So let us say we are quality assuring an institution. Okay, let me take up quality assuring a program in ACTT. We have a service called program approval. And that program approval service has 6 criteria. So one criterion is that there is approval from the governance body for offer of the program. Another criterion is that the mission and vision of the institution must match the mission of the and purpose of the program. So if you are an institution that has been registered to offer agricultural programs, you can't come and offer one in arts. The mission and vision are not in tandem. Then we have what are the quality assurance structures related to program approval, monitoring, evaluation, and review. Then we talk about the program specification. We also talk about the marketing of the program and the resources that are devoted for the program. And I say resources, we talk about finances, financial resources, human resources, and physical material resources. Right? So in that way, the external evaluator watches the entire application with its narrative and evidence and so on. We may have a site visit, and then the program is determined to be of quality. For this, in the same way, there are criterion standards for micro-credentials. ACTT is in the process of having ours approved for micro-credentials in Trinidad and Tobago.
Okay, thank you. I'm going back to the questions we asked. Cadre Steves. Cadrestes, you have a question for Ms. Joseph?
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can. You can go ahead.
It was just in reference to mentor teachers, I was just wondering what that looked like in the Caribbean. Here in Bermuda, when we have first-year teachers, they are assigned mentor teachers, and there are also a host of workshops and seminars that they are required to take. So I was just wondering what that looked like for teachers in the Caribbean, especially those who are first-year teachers.
Should I answer that? It doesn't look like that in Trinidad and Tobago. It looks like it if the principal is forward thinking. It looks like that, but as a mandate, it does not.
Because I know it was certainly helpful for me when I first came into the educational system as a teacher. You know, it was very beneficial. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have mentors. No, I have mentors. They're people that I look to ask questions. I mean, because sometimes even though you have all this knowledge, you have all of this experience, there are people, I had a principal in my training college, she say, where there's good, there's better, and where there's better, there's best. And I always know there's somebody who's better than me. So I look to that person and say, hey, I call them my education gurus. I look to them for mentorship. I pass things off. It's like, is this the best way? Is there another way to deal with this? Is there another way to look at this? Even in this presentation, I sent it to one of my friends because her PhD is in teacher professionalism and professionalization. I sent it to her. It's like, listen, I just have one slide, but could you watch it? And things like that. So again, it's the community of practice. I saw somebody say something here, and Freddie, Dr. James did answer it. Yes, having a degree is not license. Let us think of law, and I like to go to I call them the established obvious professions. After getting your law degree, you have to go to Hewarding Law School or go to the legal education. I'm trying to remember what it is in England to be actually certified and called to the bar, and that becomes your license to operate. You can't graduate with a law degree and operate. Similarly, in engineering, you can have an engineering degree and you're not an engineer because you don't belong to the profession if you don't join the profession. Medicine, you have to have your medical license to practice. So having a degree is not licensed.
Okay. So another question comes from Dirk Govaya, and they're asking about if I'm assuming it's a he, is asking about whether or not the Ministry of Education or the various ministries are aware of these goals that you outlined and if they are implementing them or they hope to implement them.
I wouldn't want to speak on behalf of the okay. Let me talk about, let's say, the National Qualifications Framework. When we were designing it, I noticed I said it was approved by, we designed it, and it was sent to the Ministry of Education for approval. The Ministry of Education would have disseminated it to other ministries. That's the Ministry of Planning and Development. Why we know this is that we got questions and comments for improvement from these ministries. So yes, they are aware of it. They are aware because the National Qualifications Framework, I'm using that as an example, is part of the ministry's policy, and I call it their strategic plan. It's an actual item on it. Although ACTT is not a division of the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Education is our line ministry. So the action became part of the policy paper. And so that action is part of Vision 2030. The Ministry of Education, Trinidad and Tobago, traditionally has engaged in the August holiday classes I can't remember what it's called, for teachers. These are teachers, confirmed teachers. When I say confirmed, I mean teachers working in the system already, not people who are trying to come into the system. And up to recently, I think COVID may have stopped it, but up to 2019, as far as I'm aware, it was enforced. I'm not so sure what happened this year. I did not see the advertisements for it. Anybody else can launch in on that. So the Ministry of Education, I think they are aware. The Ministry of, there is a Public Service Academy. I don't like to call it the PSA because that's a union in Trinidad and Tobago. So the Public Service Academy that offers training to public officers. And it's short courses, which if they choose, they can make it to micro credentials. So there are there is the knowledge of it. If you're looking for a cohesive repository that is government related, I have not seen that.
Okay, thank you. And we have time for just about 2 or 3 more questions. I am shifting to Theresa Neblet Skinner. So feel free, you can unmute your mic and ask a question, Mrs. Skinner.
No, I don't have any questions. I joined late, so I'm just listening in at the moment. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next question comes from Sharon Daniel in terms of the areas of testing if teachers were to be licensed.
Oh, I wouldn't want to talk about that. Okay, I don't have information in front of me, but I can surmise this. We would have to do an analysis of what do teachers do. So teachers use the national curriculum or national curriculum goals. So it will be their knowledge of the curriculum. It will be their knowledge of how the curriculum operates, how they can disseminate, deconstruct that curriculum for their particular context and so on. What are their skills in that? What are their skills in assessment? What are their teaching learning strategies? What is their, I call it their bag of tricks? What is it? That licensure, if I am designing it, that licensure will involve paper-based, but the licensure will more likely involve an assessment center type of evaluation, an assessment center type of evaluation where you put the teacher through hot desking, put the teachers through what else is there? Situation analysis, which is like a live, oh my gosh, it's gone out of my head. A live situation. It's gone out of my head what the term, but where the teacher has to observe a child coming to school drunk and how they are going to deal with that. So your license will be part of how you can handle the routine actions that teachers have to encounter. Yep. So, but again, I can find some teacher licensure standards or standards for teaching and forward it to the organizers. Just someone needs to remind me.
Okay. All right, so as we continue, just to remind persons are asking about the various links. The links will be provided to you on the YouTube channel, as well as on our website, CVEducators.com at a later time. So rest assured, once you are able to, you could go on to the website later on, and you should be able to get some of that information that was shared by Ms. Joseph, especially those links persons are asking about. And speaking about links, Paulette Rifa is asking Ms. Joseph, what would you consider Allison.com courses to be micro-credentials?
I'm sorry, Allison.com?
Yes.
In preparing for this, I saw it, and I have not been able to delve into it, so I can't make a conclusive statement about it. I saw it, it was linked. Many of these new to me websites have come out of the United States Department of Education sanctioning of micro-credentials. So like the NEA that I put up there, that is one of them that was born out of the United States Department, the micro-credentialing for teachers. So I would have to do some more research on the Allison, but I did see it and some others. But again, regardless of what you do, you have to always go back and see, is that website using quality assured information? So are we going to do what you call it, a micro-credential that is from a university that is not quality assured? That's a red flag. Do we want to do that? I am not saying that a university that's not quality assured cannot possibly have a high quality micro-credential, you know. But how do you know? That's the problem. How do you know? I have been on micro-credentials and I have seen the information they are positing. It's about 10 years old. But because I already had information, I was almost able to sift through that. So that's why the danger is just doing a micro-credential because it's there. I would say use the Commonwealth of Learning, which is a huge repository. The Commonwealth of Learning has even curriculum for primary and secondary school in mathematics and so on. They have a lot of resources there. There was a time I would just be there downloading everything that they put. It has gotten out of hand for me. During the pandemic, they offered a number of courses, and one of them was quality assurance for blended and online learning in the Caribbean. I mean, it was 8 weeks long, very intense, but excellent course. So during the pandemic, I spent a lot of time just trolling through a lot of the online courses. For if you use the NCORE version, NCORE definition, micro-credential. I did project management for small states or something that was run by the World Bank. It's all there. So, you know, we just have to work through. But as for that specific one, I have not done any in-depth understanding of it, so I wouldn't want to pronounce on it.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Joseph. I know we have so many questions coming in, but unfortunately we can't answer all at this time. I'm just going to allow one more question, and then we'll wrap up with that. And this one comes from Ms. Thomas, Aislinn Ann Thomas, in terms of children with special needs. And she's asking, what about assistance to teachers to meet those fighting to survive in the classroom, especially especially students who have special needs?
I'm sorry, is it micro-credentials or you're talking about?
She is asking, let me just read the question again. She said, what of the special needs child in the mainstream? In terms of the goal of teaching is that children should learn. And she's asking, what systems, or what are systems for teachers to meet those fighting to survive in the classroom?
Well, a lot of the answer to that, I would say, is in the professional learning community. One, not necessarily in the micro-credential. It is the profession. We as teachers need to come together to support each other. And sometimes I hear stories in the classroom and I always go, I wonder what I would do if I was their boy. Do I have the skills needed to survive? Because some people are just barely surviving. In the US, there's a huge exodus of teachers out of the classroom. And so, again, it could be systemic, but there could be a systemic response in terms of the Ministry of Education and all of that. But I suspect that it'll have to be at the school and classroom level. That we come together and support students with special needs, all the range of special needs. The basic teacher education degree may not be giving teachers enough skills to do this. Then there is a teacher expectation. The teacher expectation, many teachers I speak to, it's not they are thinking they are going to teach this normal child, and I don't even know what that normal child means, but they think that they have to going to be teaching this normal child. So they don't seem to be prepared personally as individuals to do this. And then there is the systemic issue of the schools and the ministry probably not providing enough support to the teachers. So given that, the community of teachers will have to come together to ensure that these children who have special needs, and I always tell people, I laugh and I tell people all the time, every time I read about autistic children, it's quite possible I have an undiagnosed or some level of autism. Because, and is it that I have it and because I wanted to succeed, I somehow coped with the world? So we need to be reflective on ourselves and see what are our coping mechanisms? How did we come to be as adults? And probably we'll be able to see ourselves in the children and so on. So I really don't want to think that the system in any time soon is going to develop the supports. So it will have to come from the professional learning community that is developed usually from inside of the school. It's very grassroots from inside the schools. The ministry cannot come and say, hey, develop professional learning communities. It's not going to happen. So, Anne, I hope that answers the question.
Thank you very much, Ms. Joseph, and thank you to all the attendees that shared their questions with us. We do appreciate it. Unfortunately, not all the questions could have been answered at this point in time because we do have a very, very tight schedule. So thanks again to everyone, and I pass you back to Dr. Schott.
Thank you. Just like Anderson said, there are more questions than answers. So we'll probably have to run another session to get some of the unanswered questions addressed, not answered. Because more often than not, we will always have unanswered questions. But thank you for raising the issues anyway, and thank you, Ms. Joseph. Wonderful. And now we will move on to our next speaker, who will give us some idea of what's happening inside the classroom and what should happen inside the classroom. Our next speaker is Professor Brian Beatty. He's a professor of instructional technologies in the Department of Equity, Leadership Studies, and Instructional Technologies at San Francisco State University. Brian's primary areas of interest and research include social interaction in online learning, flipped classroom implementation, and developing instructional design theory for hybrid flexible learning environment. At SF State University, Dr. Beatty pioneered the development and evaluation of high-flex course design model for blended learning environments, implementing a student-directed hybrid approach to better support student learning. Dr. Beatty has more than 25 years experience as a classroom teacher, trainer, and instructional designer at school businesses and the US Navy. Professor Beatty, over to you. Take it away.
All right. Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me to speak today at this wonderful gathering. I was just listening to much of the Q&A from the last session. You have, excellent questions, and I hope that you're able to get some answers to some other questions, perhaps in this session. But I also invite your questions through the Q&A. I know we have a bit of a limited time today, but I'm also very willing to respond if you have other questions through email or any other means where we might have some communication about these. I'm very, very excited about what we've been doing with HyFlex in our own program for a long time, quite honestly, almost more than 15 years now. But what we've seen really happening around the world, especially the last 2 or 3 years, as we've all become much more aware of the need for our students to have some flexibility in how they participate in the learning experiences that we provide. And what that typically means is they need access and they need schedule flexibility, which means we need to have some online options, but without giving up the classroom options, because we know sometimes the classroom is a much better learning place for some of the content, but also for some of the students in other cases differently. But I get ahead of myself a little bit. I'm going to share a presentation with you, and the presentation has also been shared with the organizers. And so I don't know if we'll get through all this, but there's information in here that I'll talk through relatively quickly, and there's more that you can look at afterwards, especially if you have interest in seeing some things or maybe clicking on some links that I haven't had a chance to share. So today I was going to briefly talk a little bit about how the education shift is happening that we've all been seeing, and what is high flex design, and make sure we're all clear when that term is used. What does it mean and what does it not mean? And thinking about how we might use high flex or similar approaches, really flexible design approaches, to help our students, and through our students help our institution. We have institutional goals that might be better met when we're able to better serve students with better access and even higher quality access in some cases. And of course, we always have challenges and opportunities, and we'll take some time to, I'll mention some of those for you, and I imagine that you will probably have other questions, and oftentimes they're around the challenges and the opportunities. All right, so why high flex? Why hybrid flexible courses? And that's this whole idea. We started this a long time ago because we had a graduate program here in the U.S. in the San Francisco area, and we had declining enrollments. This was in the 2005 timeframe, and so we had an economic downturn, 2002, 2003, and we were still seeing the impact of that. And as the economy gets rolling again, what we find in graduate education is oftentimes we have reduced enrollment because people are back at work. They don't have the time for graduate programs, nor necessarily do they need them to find jobs if they already have jobs. So we found this decline in enrollment, and our department chair came to a meeting among the faculty and told us that he thought our solution to our decline in enrollment was to take our 25-year face-to-face program that was built up over many years and had a wonderful reputation in the area, and turn it into a fully online program. And the faculty, we just looked at each other because we didn't teach online classes. None of us had ever taught an online class. Very few of us, if any, had ever taken an online class. So this was a brand new thing to us, as well as our students weren't online students. They liked the classroom, and they were students who could find the time. They had the resources to be there in person. So this radical shift did not seem to us to be something that would be very workable. So I suggested that maybe we could come up with a compromise solution where we would be able to change the way we teach, so we could bring in some online students to help our enrollment into our face-to-face classes, because we did not want to give up the face-to-face instruction and learning environment. And so that was the why that pushed me towards finding a solution for our department, so that we could meet the enrollment needs and not give up the high quality design and the interaction that we were liking to have with our students. So I did that for a semester. I dabbled it with a class. I tried a few sessions. It worked reasonably well as we figured out what was going to work and what was not working. The next semester, I took one whole class and created a high flex version of that course and offered that. That was very successful. And then the semester after that, so like 3 semesters into this, I finally was teaching all of my classes high flex. And then over a number of years, the rest of the department, the faculty started teaching in high flex, or some of them actually shifted over to online. We had a few faculty who kept teaching just classroom because of what they were teaching. So what we found was that students did participate in all modes. They were satisfied with their learning, and we didn't see any measurable grade or learning difference at the data we were looking at. And you can, if you're interested in that, you can do some searching. Actually, this URL up here, the High Flex Learning Community, has a bibliography that has about 150 different papers, dissertations, master's theses, conference proceedings, a whole range of papers that you can look at to see where we have been doing research and where many, many, many others have been doing research. So why is this a global movement now? What has happened? Well, we've always had this problem. Sometimes we call this a wicked problem, because it's very difficult to solve. There's no single solution to this problem of having equitable access to high quality instruction for everyone who needs it and who wants it. And then the other challenge that's part of this problem is how do we get there, whatever that there might be, from where we are? We can't just stop our, well, you wouldn't think we could just stop the way we do higher education and restart it in 3 weeks with a whole different approach. Now, actually, I have to question whether or not we could or couldn't. We just did that, many of us, in 2020, but that's not something we would ever choose to do, right? So we need to get there from where we are, and we don't want to just a lot of things that we've been doing have been working very well for many students, but they're not working well for all students. Not everyone has access, and even when they do have access, it's not necessarily access with equity. They're not necessarily reaching the same learning outcomes because of the way our systems are set up and maybe the way that we know how to teach that way. And so there's some quality differences that we might see. And so that's something that we want any solution path we came up with, we wanted to make sure we were addressing access, we were addressing quality, we were addressing equity. And there's a lot of different ways of looking at equity, but we're thinking about equitable learning outcomes first and foremost. But then we have the whole concepts of equity, inclusion, and belonging, where we're reaching out to students who maybe haven't been part of our classrooms before. And so those might be students from different economic levels or geographic levels or areas, from different home lives, from different social environments where maybe education is not something that their community or their family has really been supportive of. We want them to be included. We want them to belong. So this is you can see this is a challenge, right? This is a big challenge. And so I think that there's a path to follow, or at least to consider following. And our path has gone through the hybrid flexible course designs, and many hundreds, if not thousands, of institutions around the world have been looking at this and finding ways to make this work for some, if not all, of their faculty and their students. The problem we have with the individual courses, the answer is not just, well, if you want access, just create online courses, right? That doesn't work for everybody. Any of these single mode classes, like the classroom, we are cutting some students out of the opportunity because they can't be there, either location-wise or time-wise. They have other conflicts. It could be work commitments, it could be family commitments, it could be they live too far away, or they don't have regular access to transportation, or it's too costly, so they're not able to be in our course, in our classes. If you look at your classes today in the classroom, these are students who you won't see because they can't be there. And yet we still want, and sometimes we're mandated to serve them. We have to find ways to do that. So enter the online courses. Online synchronous, the world went online synchronous to a large extent in spring of 2020 and stayed there for at least a semester, maybe 2 or 3 semesters, but not everyone had access to that. And we saw that. And even when they had access, it wasn't always quality access, right? There was a lot of good learning and teaching that was going on in the online synchronous space in the last few years. But there was also some relatively poor teaching because of poor technology or poor design. And there were students who didn't necessarily know or want to be in that situation. And so sometimes they would log in and they would check out. Just a black box on the screen, no microphone, no camera. Did they learn anything? Who knows? And then, of course, we have the online asynchronous courses. A lot of us have had these for many years, and they often work very well. We've had programs, online programs, for decades, several decades, in many of our institutions and courses especially. And oftentimes the students learn quite well, but there are also lots of students who are not a good fit for that. They don't have the technology, or they don't have the skills, or they don't have the interest in learning primarily independently. And so essentially they don't have quality access that way. So the point is that any one of these single mode courses cuts out some students. And so I think we should be looking for ways to find course designs that allow us to give access to students in any one of these modes, or at least 2 of the modes, face-to-face, and 1 of the online modes, so we give them legitimate choices. Hybrid flexible course design, or HyFlex, just came up. I had to have a term for my first proposal for a conference to talk about this, and this term seemed to be the one that made the most sense to me. It's a hybrid course. It's a mix of face-to-face and online activities, online paths, and at least 1 online path, maybe 2. And then a face-to-face path, and flexible. Just having multiple modes, I think, is important. But during a semester, during the course, the length of time that a class is being taught to students, things happen in students' lives that change their ability to be there in person or to participate well online. It could be the content. Content gets extremely confusing. They've been trying to learn online. They're not doing well. They need a place to come where they can get more customized and individualized support, and that's usually in the classroom. All right. Or they're happy learning in the classroom, but now something changes. They have to take care of a family member that they didn't have to take care of before, or their work schedule changed, or they get that job, or they have to relocate. You know, maybe it's even just 60 kilometers away, or it could be in another country. What about those students? Can we keep them learning? And that's where the online options often come to play. So that flexibility is not something that I, as an instructor, could predict, other than predicting that almost every student will need flexibility. I can't tell which week from week to week, which student needs to be online, which student needs to be in person. I have to leave that choice up to them. And that's what HighFlex is about. That's why it's so different. It's not just multimodal. It's multimodal, and the modes are chosen by the students. And so it really does become a student-directed hybrid. That's why I sometimes use that term. So this is a picture that was created by EDUCATOR a number of years ago. And I like it because I like the center of this, which is really representing to me the course. It's a single course. It's a single learning community, but we have multiple paths for participation. We have the classroom path and we have the online path. And sometimes that online path is asynchronous, sometimes it's synchronous, and sometimes it's either one. At our campus, we actually leave that up to the faculty to decide which online paths do you want to offer, but we always require them to have a face-to-face path as well. I'm not going to take the time to play this, but if you want to listen to this short little video, it's about 80 seconds or so, but it does a good job of explaining, you know, basically the idea of HighFlex is relatively simple. It becomes more complex in implementation, as you might imagine. Many of our wonderful ideas in education of doing things differently are not that complicated at the surface level, but once you start doing it, like flipping a classroom, a simple idea, have students prepare on their own, and then they come to class and they do these application activities. Not a very difficult concept to grasp, but actually working it out and helping students learn how to learn differently and learning how to teach a little differently as well. That's where the complication comes in. Same thing with HighFlex. The HighFlex Learning Community site, like I mentioned up here, is a place where you can actually watch this video, and the link is here on the slide. And this is, and the reason I put this here is because it's something you could easily share with someone who says, HighFlex, what is that? Take a look at the video, it'll explain it really quickly. So why would we do HighFlex? Why do we do this? Here are some of the advantages that we see, and there are probably many more you might think of in your own situation. But basically, the primary advantage for students is that they have flexible ways to access the opportunities to learn. And so they don't have to be in person on campus at the same time and place every week or every Tuesday or whatever it might be. They also don't have to always be online asynchronous learning. If they have the opportunity to be on campus, they can choose to be that way, to participate that way. But that allows them to make more decisions. That actually gives them more agency in their learning. They can learn how to take more responsibility for those choices, but that's something they usually need to be supported in, right? Your expert learners will have no problem making that choice. Your naive learners, your learners who don't really understand how they learn best, will need some help and support in making those decisions. And so you might actually put up some guardrails around that. So maybe they have to prove their learning motivation before they get full access to online, or maybe they can have full access, but then at some point you make a determination 3 or 4 weeks in, it seems like your learning is not very strong. We think you should consider coming into the classroom, or at least doing it synchronously. So you might have some limitations on that, but that's a local decision. That's a very context bound decision. So if we give students access like this and the ability to choose, they can actually have much less schedule conflict. How many students do you know who wanted to take your class at 10 o'clock on Wednesday, but found that, I'm sorry, I have to work from 8 till 12 every day, so I can have food for myself and for my family. I can't be at your 10 o'clock class. Well, these schedule conflict can be somewhat resolved, and the conflict's not just obviously with out of the university or out of the college conflicts. It's also with other classes. Often the students want to take 2 classes, and they have a competition for their time. They're both on Tuesday at 9:45. Maybe there's only a 5 or 10 minute overlap of these classes, but our systems would not let them enroll in both because there's an overlap. Well, with a HighFlex course, students could take one of them, at least for part of the time, fully online and participate that way instead of in person. So you could resolve some of these conflicts. You might find that enrollment in courses might increase because now more students have access. This is what we have found in several situations, and lots of colleges have done this, especially recently, the last year, to recover some of their enrollment that they lost during the pandemic season, when many of our students went away and a lot of them never came back. right? So they're finding that if they give students more flexible ways to participate in classes, they actually are recovering some enrollment. Students might actually find that there are different programs that are available to them, and different groups of students who may live, maybe they're just on the edge of what you would consider your regional, your region area. And those students on the outer edges probably aren't coming in very big numbers because it's difficult for them to get there. Well, you might actually find that now you can reach out to students who are in different locations, maybe even farther away than that, like a typical online student, and then let them know, hey, even though you're not likely to be here, if you are in the area for the class, you're welcome to be here. There is a seat reserved for you, or at least that you would have access to. Students might actually learn better when they can make a decision at the beginning of a day. I don't feel up to being on campus today, or I've got these other things going on. If I had to be on campus, it would be very stressful for me, and that would probably have an impact on the way I learn that day in the course and the class. So I'm going to choose to be online. And so when you give them that freedom to make that choice, sometimes they feel like they are more appreciated, right? And then they feel a little bit more connected to the class, to the faculty member, maybe even to the institution. Maybe they're more satisfied with their experience. Does that satisfaction lead to a little different experience for them? I think it does. I think it's difficult to measure, but I do think that there are things going on in the way students think and feel in their emotional states when they're in our classes that might be better if we didn't force them there, if it really wasn't the best place for them that particular day. And another thing, faculty, we can design for high quality teaching and hopefully learning in each of the participation paths. If we have the time to design, if we have the skills to design, we can do this. And what this does then is it gives us basically 2 or 3 paths for students to participate that we can be confident in. If we can find ways to manage the workload, the building the materials, but also facilitating in these various modes, we can find. I think we find that I feel like I'm a much better instructor than I was 20 years ago, not just because I'm older and I have some gray hairs, but because I've learned how to be much more flexible with my students and let them know that learning is the outcome that we're shooting for. And you choose the mode, but in that mode, here's what you get to do, right? I still have the designed path for them. And so I'm confident that they'll learn in any mode, which means that if they start moving into directions I wasn't expecting, or maybe don't help me as a teacher, I like to teach students in the classroom. But if I have a class where everyone chooses to be online for whatever reason, if I'm confident they can still learn that way, then it just becomes me managing my own emotional, maybe a little bit of dissatisfaction because now no one's in classroom with me and I don't get to be there because I know they're not going to be there that day. Now I'm going to teach them online. That's a different thing for me to be wrestling with than being concerned that students aren't learning because they're absent. Back in the day, right, when students couldn't be there in person, what would they do? They just wouldn't be there. They'd be absent that day, maybe for a week, maybe for a couple of weeks. And did you have a path for them to follow other than, okay, read the textbook, write the paper or get ready for the quiz or the test when you come back to campus? That's not really, I don't think that's adequate design. I think some students actually could learn in that way, but those are students who are good independent learners. Many of our students are not that way. The other thing we find with HyFlex is that we have essentially built in instructional continuity to the institution when the campus is not available to us. As long as we have our technology systems running, right? If we have a campus that's not available, in my area of the world, we struggle now with wildfire smoke, usually for several weeks out of every fall term. Either the campus is closed or we're really reducing the time that we're asking students to be outside. And so rather than just canceling classes for a few days, we can easily say now, okay, instead of canceling classes, all the classes are going to move back online. That doesn't mean all our classes are designed for HyFlex, but what it does mean is that our campus has become confident that we can continue teaching in the online space when the campus is not available, as long as we have our technology systems available to us. Now, not every situation we'd have technology, right? If the electrical grid was wiped out, well, we're not doing any teaching online either. But that allows us to be a lot more flexible, and the leadership of the institution doesn't have to be as concerned. Like, say there's a transit strike coming up and people won't be able to get to campus, they can still have classes working, even if it might take 2 or 3 weeks, with no trains or buses or things like that. They can still have classes going on online because we have the technologies, and most of our faculty have taught online now. And for those of us who teach HyFlex, For us, it's not a problem at all, other than the fact that, you know, whatever's happening in the world might have an impact on our ability to teach and to learn. But technology-wise, it's already there. So if I can't be in classroom, maybe I'm the one who can't be in the classroom. It doesn't matter. I have an online path for students that they can follow, and if it's an asynchronous path, then I don't have to be there. You know, if I'm not well enough to actually be teaching a class online, like like in a Zoom space as well. So there are a lot of good reasons to do this. I think the important thing to start with and to consider and to start reshaping is, well, what would you need to do? What would be your why? Right? This is an institution decision probably at some level, but it's also, I think, a departmental or a program and especially a faculty decision. I think we have to be convinced at every level that this is important to do. Why? Because it takes time, it takes effort, it takes resources to do this. Your technology systems might have to be improved a little bit. Your teaching abilities will have to be probably expanded. Right. And even though that may not be a bad thing for faculty, or that's not like they'd be afraid of that, it still takes time and energy to do that. And it takes effort. Right. It's important to define your approach. Our approach says you have to be in the classroom. You have to have the classroom available, and you have to have an online available. But the online, you can decide if it's synchronous or asynchronous or both. Right. So we allow part of that definition up to faculty, because on our campus, this is our context. This is what we need to do. But other campuses may do that very differently. Some will say the HyFlex class is in person and online asynchronously, and they don't talk about the online synchronous, maybe because they don't have the classroom technology to support that. Or they might say it's in person and online synchronous, but they don't talk about the online asynchronous because they may not have the time available for faculty to learn how to build an online path through their course that's of good quality, and so they would rather focus on just the synchronous in person and online. But after you define your approach, then you start developing expectations for students and for faculty. So students who are enrolling in a course like this, what is expected of them? How do we support those students? What about the faculty? What's expected of the faculty? How do we support those faculty? As I said, this is our definition. This is the third or fourth version of our definition. We started doing this when we started defining our online courses and hybrid courses officially, and said, well, what about HyFlex? We have a bunch of those. So we added those to our definition. But this is what we say. We talk about choice. We talk about face-to-face and online. And in online, we talk about synchronous, asynchronous, or there's another term that started being used about 3 years ago, bichronous, which means a combination of synchronous and asynchronous. A little bit about technology. Part of the classroom change of of where we're going with this and changing our classrooms is around the technology that we have. We have classroom technology, we have online technology, and then we have technologies that work both in the classroom and online. And to me, this is the magic of HyFlex, or maybe one of the enablers, to use more formal language, of HyFlex, is technologies that allow us to do things with students in person and online at the same time, or have the ability to connect even asynchronous learners back into what we were doing in the live classroom or the synchronous space through technology that support recording, but then also allow students who come in after the fact to inject their comments, their notes, etc., their interactions into the same artifacts that we created when we were doing things synchronously. So classroom technology is basically the audio and visual, right, to support the students who are joining us live online, as well as to support recording what goes on in the classroom. What happens in the classroom, I think, is important in part because there's a lot of content, learning information that's generated in the discussions that we have in the classroom, not just presented by the teacher, the tutor, but also through the conversations, the questions that students raise. Every time I teach a class, every class, the classroom interactions are different than they were the time before that, and they will be in the future, because the students are different and they ask different questions. So I say different words and the students say different words. That's content that's being generated that I like to capture for everyone to learn from. So we do recording, we have transcripts for all of that. But in order to do that, we have to be able to capture the audio and the video. The audio is most important because that's where most of the information is being, that's the channel that has the most information. The video is nice to have, but that's typically something we end up with relatively small videos, often zoomed out. And so the quality is not as good from learning. If I had a class where the video was more important, like I have a whiteboard with important notes on it, I would have to have a camera to do that, or some ability to capture that, maybe a digital whiteboard to use instead of a camera solution. But I need to capture that information for the learners as well. As well, when I'm in the classroom, if I have synchronous online students, I have to be able to see them and hear them if they have something to say into the class, right? And I want them to have something to say. So they can't participate online synchronously without talking in my classes. So I have to be able to see them and to hear them well. And then we capture that. Online asynchronously, well, we have our learning management systems, of course. We use a recorded video from the classroom, but we don't rely just on that. Far from it. We have a fully developed online course path for them. So even if we didn't have a classroom meeting that week, which sometimes happens, they still have a path they can follow. They log in, and there's probably half a dozen things for them to do. They read, they watch, they write, they interact, they answer questions, they do other kinds of things. Maybe they post their own little videos about something, but that's designed as a fully online path for the class. And so that requires time and energy, but we have the skills to do that. We have online quality programs that we can use for these courses as well. It just takes time to build and to develop those skills. In the classroom, I don't want the classroom to be that different than it was before. I don't want technology used because I have synchronous learners or a recording for an asynchronous audience to have an impact, at least a great impact, on the experience of the face-to-face students. That face-to-face experience is important for them. And so if I have to have them on their laptops all the time, maybe even wearing headsets in the classroom because we're trying to get them to connect to the online synchronous students in the lab class, that changes their experience quite a bit. And I wouldn't normally do that unless it was a special thing, a special evolution or something like that. So I try to keep it as much close as possible for them. So those are some of the technologies. Here's a link you can follow if you're interested. There's an online magazine, EdTech Magazine, did a whole series of articles on HyFlex or flexible teaching and spaces. They highlighted the room I was in for one of them. You'll see my smiling face in there a little bit, but you can take a look at that. And it's kind of a 3D one. You can kind of click through and see the various things that we're doing. I'll leave that for you to explore on your own. Design principles, real briefly. I know we're going to stop. We're going to do Q&A in just a couple of minutes here. Four principles: learner choice, or sometimes I call this alternatives, but they have to have choice for learners. And we have to give students that choice for it to be high flex. It could be multimodal without the flexibility. Then it's just not high flex. Just don't call it high flex. Equivalence, when I talk about the principle of equivalence, it's about learning outcomes, equivalent learning outcomes, not equivalent experiences. I mean, they should lead to equivalent learning, but it's going to be a different experience. The classroom experience is different than either one of the online experiences. The online asynchronous experience is different than any of the other synchronous experiences. You can't tell them it's not, and I don't think you would believe that anyway. Why would they believe it? But it doesn't mean it's worse. It just means it's different. We have to create opportunities for equivalent learning. Reuse is an important principle, so that I like to build things once and reuse them in all modes. So I build content once. I build a lot of my engagement approaches, like interactions. I might do discussions in class and discussions online. Sometimes I have all students doing online discussions as homework assignments, because then they get I do one activity and everybody's part of it. I don't need two activities for everything. This comes into the world of assessment as well. If I can do assessment approaches and use the same assessments for all students, then I don't have to worry about, well, what are online students doing and what are face-to-face students? What if we did it all together? That usually means out of the classroom. Accessibility is another important one. So for the accessibility, we have to make sure not only do we meet the requirements, the law, but also making sure that we provide students with as much support to get access, especially to the online spaces. If they don't have that access, do they need technology? Do they need bandwidth? Do they need skills in using those to help them learn? Those are things that you might build into a student support program. And then there's more on here about the design that you can look through on your own. We typically look at student learning outcomes first, and then the instructional content. We look at assessment strategies and engagement strategies, and we look at the classroom, and then whatever online spaces we have, and make sure that we kind of set up grids. Here's what we're doing for assessment. Well, here's the classroom approach. Here's the online, and here's the various forms of online. And then we look to make sure that we're trying to do as much as possible as we can. All right. Okay. So I think I'm about out of time for this. Are we ready for Q&A? Is it time to move into that?
You have 3 minutes again, Professor.
Okay. And so I may show some more slides in answers to questions that come up. That's my luck.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor, for that insightful, very insightful presentation. I know Anderson's really not ready to go. Maybe he has quite a lot of questions already for you. But I just want to add that it was an excellent presentation. And what I like the way you came up with high flex. Really, really creative, really innovative. I like that, you know, and it's really advantageous. And what I like too is the instructional continuity. I think that is so good. And the high level of autonomy that you give to the instructors. Similarly, students get that autonomy. And before you go to Jonathan, I have a question that I want to ask you. Have you found that high flex was able to increase student agency?
Well, yes, I think it naturally increases their agency because they're not being told by the institution or the faculty member anymore exactly when they have to be in class and where they have to be and for how long. Many of our students, I mean, many of us, quite honestly, we grew up in a system that always told us where to be, when to be there, and what to do while we were there. Right. So it was safe for us from the aspect of agency because we didn't have a lot of agency. Right. We knew we showed up at school. We were told what to do. We were moved from room to room and boom, as long as we were learning inside those classes, we finished things off. Now what we're saying is that we know that that doesn't work for all of our students. And so we're going to give them some choices. And so they have to make that choice. Interestingly enough, when I ask students in a couple of surveys, if they preferred making their own choices, I thought I would have close to 100% of them saying, yes, thank you very much, Dr. Beatty. I like making my own choices about that. But I found that was not the case. About 84% said they liked or very much liked it. But some of them, 16% said, actually, I don't like making that choice. And so I think they were being forced to assume some agencies that maybe they weren't prepared for. And in my mind, I was thinking at the time, well, why don't you just consider yourself a face-to-face student and take the online off the table and say, for me, I'm a face-to-face student in this class. Or for me, I'm just an asynchronous learner in this class. In my mind, that's the way I think, but they weren't thinking that way. So now when at the beginning of my courses, after learning that not all of them like making the choices, we talk through what it means to make this choice and what it means if you choose to be a synchronous online learner, what are the various characteristics of that you have to be ready to accept? What are your responsibilities in that area? And the same thing for the classroom, the same thing for the online asynchronous. And so I think that they're better prepared to make that choices, but I do think it happens naturally because you're not going to make that choice for them. Now, in some situations, if you have students that you know maybe have no experience learning online, you may come in and set the expectation that we're all starting in the classroom. And then if you are able to learn well and we've got you maybe there's some things you have to answer as far as technology and location, et cetera, to move online. Maybe you get permission to move online with the caveat that if it doesn't work well for you, you come back to the classroom. So that's kind of a ramp up to agency, right? That you could potentially use in a context where you thought it was very important. That takes away some flexibility from students at the beginning, but it might prevent you from having students who end up choosing online because it's very convenient for them, but it's not a good place for them to learn, in which case they may end up not having a successful learning experience and may even drop out of a class just because they had too much agency they weren't ready for. So that's one of these strategic choices about how you would deploy this at an institution or in a program or even just in a particular course. What I've always told faculty is that if you restrict the flexibility for students as you're learning how to do this and as you're learning how well they respond to it, I don't think that's a problem as long as you tell them ahead of time, here's the flexibility you have. Now, here's what you might have in the future, and here's the path to get to that. So it's any flexibility, I think, is better than no flexibility, even if it's something that they have to kind of earn. It's not quite the right word, but they have to show that they will be able to handle it. Because if we gave them opportunities to learn in a way that was just really bad for them, that would be probably unethical, right? That would not be something that we would want to be as professional educators.
Thank you so very much, Anderson.
Thank you very much to Professor Beatty and of course, and Dr. Shah, thank you very much. So we do have a few questions coming into the chat. And the first question comes from Sebastian Narayan Singh, I'm professor, and he asks, does flip the classroom require independent learners? So can you
Sure.
answer the question?
Yes, there's a lot of good literature on flipping the classroom. We've been talking about that for, I don't know, is it 20 years yet? It seems like it. But what it requires is students who are willing and able and motivated to prepare out of class for the upcoming synchronous class session. Synchronous online or face-to-face typically is how that's done. And so they have to be able to prepare for your classes. I tried this with my own graduate students for a while, and I didn't continue because I found that I thought this is what I expected anyway, right? I used to teach high school math, science, and things like that, and I expected students to prepare for class so we could do problems in class, right? And so we could do the applications and answer those difficult questions. But if they didn't come prepared for class, I found the same thing with my graduate students. If they didn't do the readings before class, we couldn't talk about complex application issues. We had to talk about the basics, right? We had to go through definitions and concepts and simple things that I'd hoped that they had already prepared for that. And so that does require students to be able to do that more independently. Some of them create study groups and do it, more collaboratively, but it does require them to take on that responsibility before class, so that in the class environment, in the synchronous environment, you can rely on them being able to contribute to, maybe you're doing little small group application tasks or individual things like that. So it does require students who are willing to take on that responsibility. I think that in a lot of our courses with a lot of our students, we have a mix of students. Some are willing to do that and some are not. And so I found that for me, if I was going to continue flipped classroom ideas, I'd have to almost have the opportunity to group students in the live session that were prepared, but then also have groups of students who maybe weren't so prepared, and so that they would do more basic things. Because if you take students who aren't prepared and you put them into a situation where they're asked to apply those ideas and they don't even understand the basic ideas, it's not going to work, right? They're not going to get it nearly as much out of that, and that might take away from that of those students who are prepared. So that's a very long answer. I'm a professor, so I like to talk. The short answer is yes. I think it does require independent learning skills.
I think the long responses are also welcome, Professor. Don't worry. All right, so we have another question coming. In fact, your views actually, in terms of your views of the high flex with high school students. What are your views on that?
Yes, actually, there are some high schools in the U.S. I'm aware of that have been doing this in small parts, small aspects of what they're doing for many years. And clearly, flexibility is different at the high school level because we're working with students who are typically not adults. And so they're not usually legally able to make those participation decisions on their own. And so some of our schools will rely on a family unit, a guardian or a parent, to be part of that decision. So students may be choosing to learn online for a particular class, but they're not making the decision on their own, because someone has to be responsible for their safety, for their location, and as well as to make the legal decision that they're choosing to learn out of class. Especially the last year or so, more of our districts have added flexible choices in because they found that this would attract some students back to their schools whose family were saying they're not coming back to school, at least not right away, at least not now. So there is that going on. We also have some schools that provide the opportunity for students to learn more independently, like an asynchronous path through a course, but to be there at school while they're doing that. And so they'll have locations, in the study areas, in the library, or some other place where students can basically check in there as, okay, I'm here on campus. That meets the legal requirement for me to be here, and I'm going to be learning in this class, but I'm going to be doing it independently over here. So there are different models like that that have been set up that can work just as well. It does require either kind of a strong social environment around the student to help make sure that they are actually engaged in learning, like they were during the synchronous space. Sometimes that works well, sometimes it doesn't work so well, but that would be a requirement. Or they're at school in a space that gives them the opportunity to be either synchronously connected to a class that for some reason they don't want to be there in person for, or asynchronously learning. Some schools, especially systems of schools, are finding ways that they can use this to have students at one school taking classes at a different school when there's space available for that. They could get a course they couldn't take before, and they can join in synchronously, but they're maybe in their home campus, and then the other school could be 20 miles away, you know, or 50 kilometers away, who knows, that they just didn't have the same class in all the campuses. I think this is one of the things that our systems of schools might find ways to find as another advantage point, where they could have specialization on a particular campus for a particular topic and have students from all the different schools that are part of the system as part of that class, even though those students are joining in remotely because they're not there on campus. Students probably wouldn't be going in and out of class flexibly like before, but it does create a multimodal environment with some flexibility that is potentially available for students. So yeah, it can work in high schools. There are some schools, of course, you know, where some colleges, you know, in some areas of the world where, you know, high school is part of the college, right? You come in for 4 or 5 years, and then you get into maybe the first 2 years of what we would consider a 4-year school. It's all in the same school. And so they're finding that this is working. It's challenging. I think you have to learn how it best works with your students and your faculty and your family communities, but it certainly can work.
Okay, thank you. And I must remind all attendees, please, once you have any questions for us or questions for Professor Beatty, please use the question and answer section for putting your questions there. Okay, so as we continue, Dale, Professor, is asking if you could repeat the key strategies for effectively managing a high flex teaching environment and ensuring both in-person and remote students. Okay, I guess this is two sections, meaning that he's asking for a repeat of the key strategies and ensuring both in-person and remote students are equally engaged and supported.
Right. So this is some of the things I would normally talk about, but I didn't really get to. But when we talk about the design aspect, we really look at these 4 areas versus the outcomes. Can all the outcomes be met in each of the modes we intend to offer? And that's almost always yes, but sometimes the answer is no. In that case, what we would say is, for example, if we have a science class that has a lecture and a lab, some of our science teachers won't teach labs online or can't teach labs online. Students have to be there in person, but the lectures can be high flex. And so those outcomes met by the lectures, they allow full flexibility, but then for the lab components, they might require them to be in person. So that kind of outcomes, to make sure that they would work, is an important starting point. And then the content. What content do we provide in, and how do we make that engaging for all the students? Are there ways to make it more engaging than just read a paper or watch this video? You know, what if it's reading and responding and taking notes? We have some tools we can use that allow people to take notes on a paper they're reading in a web browser, and then that can be shared with other people. So you can make that kind of engaging for students in all the modes. Assessing learning. What about the learning? And it's not just the formal learning, it's also the informal learning, the formative evaluation. How do we do that in ways that are engaging for all the students? And then engaging students themselves, just in general engagement. What are we doing for the classroom? Are we using discussions? What about online? Are we using discussions? Okay, what else are we doing besides that? And so there are different techniques and tools you can use for that. So for example, let me just talk real briefly about some of the other ways of engagement. So we're asking students to engage with content and with each other and with the faculty members. So in a classroom, you're probably used to talking to students. Are they talking back to you? We try to use the techniques of an active learning classroom in person, and we then translate those to the online synchronous space, because when we're doing kind of breakout discussions in the classroom, we can do breakout discussions online. I don't usually try to mix the online students in with the face-to-face students, because it's very difficult to manage the audio in that situation. So I have online groups in the online breakout rooms and face-to-face groups in the classroom, but they're all taking notes and reporting out through one shared Google document. And then we use that for our debrief. And then asynchronous students later, they come in, they listen to the classroom debrief. We don't record the breakout discussions, but we do record the debrief, and then they add their own notes to that same document. So at the end, we have one document everyone's contributed to, so that creates an engagement experience for them, and they're across all the modes. When I'm the other important thing I'll say about this is when I have students talking to me in the classroom, I also want students talking to me online. So we have online discussions. Those online discussions, if I only have them for online asynchronous students, it tends to be a smaller group of students, and it's not a very good discussion. And so what I do instead is have my whole class assigned to do that same online discussion. So we're all talking together between class sessions, like from a Wednesday to a Wednesday, about the same topic. And these are applied concepts for what we talked about in class. The classroom discussions are usually more basic definitions, concepts, because the students aren't often that well prepared. Even if they are, we want to make sure they've got the basics. So we talk about that more in class. Online, we talk more about applying these ideas. It's like the backwards of the flip, quite honestly. But we do that all together. And so that creates an engagement for them that goes across all modes. When we're in the classroom, online synchronous, what we're doing in the classroom typically works pretty well online synchronously. I want those students online to interact. And if I just have them listening for 45 minutes, or even in my classes up to 2 hours, we might be together, that's not going to be good for anybody. And so I do 2 or 3 different interactive exercises with them, with all the students, in person and online synchronously during that time period. One is usually a breakout room activity of some sort. Another one is I use a tool like Mentimeter or Kahoot or something else that requires them to log in to an online space, and they answer questions. And sometimes I'll integrate those into a presentation. So we're all doing that together, and that creates a record of that. And then the asynchronous students later, they will listen to and they'll watch the recording of the presentation. They have the slides, if we use slides. And then they're also required to come back into that tool and add their own answers to those questions. So once again, everyone's doing the same experience, just at different times. So that creates a more engagement for them. And so the online participation for the synchronous students, they know that if I call on them, they have to be ready to respond. And I expect their response to have their camera on. Not always, they don't always put cameras on. I don't require it, because sometimes there's a good reason for them to have a camera off. But it's certainly part of the expectation. So I treat them as if they're in the physical classroom. If I'm asking questions of the students in front of me, I'm going to ask questions of the students, specifically calling them out, especially if I haven't heard from them. Or I'll ask them to put it into the chat, those kinds of things. So there are a lot of different tools that we can use for that. Online asynchronously, the biggest challenge here is to make sure you have enough students participating online asynchronously. And that's where I have all the students in classes up there. And I have to be part of that conversation. I have to be facilitating the discussion. So several times a week, every other day, there's a little note in my calendar: go online to interact in the forums. Go online to interact in the forums. Because if I don't put that into my calendar, I might forget. I can't even believe myself that I would forget I had online students in the forums, but it happens. And so I make sure it's in there for an hour every other day. So that's like 3 hours a week. And it's not, I don't spend a whole hour for every class. Sometimes it's only 20 minutes, but I'm making sure that I'm part of those threads that have been developing of students talking to each other about the ideas. So I think all of these tools can really help. It does still require students to make the choice to interact. Students have to choose to participate. Even though you have wonderful designs and you're there facilitating, you're pulling them in. Sometimes they're very resistant. And there are some cases where you said, well, they're not going to participate. And what I try to do to motivate in my classes, I give them a large part of their grade, like up to 30% of their grade is participation in different ways. So they have to show up, right? But showing up is also interacting with us while they're showing up. There's the online discussion they have to do. And I also do an online reflection form, like an open journal for every student every week, where they log in, they reply to their own thread, they tell me how they're learning, not what they're learning, but the process of learning. And they give me suggestions on how it might be better for them. And they do that every week. So all of that's 30% of their grade. Most of my students will participate because they don't want to give up a big part of their grade. These are even grad students. Even graduate students work for points. I found that out. I can't give them chocolate, so I give them points.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to another question right away, because we have just about 4 minutes again. All right, so Mrs. Sandra Fagari Henry, she's asking about if you could compare the use of the HighFlex design for elementary as opposed to the high school educators. And another question she's asking, any advice for the elementary or the early childhood care and education teachers?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thank you for asking it. I think the biggest question I would have is why would we need this flexibility for those students? And that's the question of the day, really, is making sure that there's an important reason why this would be helpful for them. It's not something that I would actually recommend for anyone just to do because someone tells them to do it, or because it's just a new thing to do. But if there's a good reason why you have to be able to support students who are there in person and students who are remote online in whatever case it might be, okay, now we need to find a solution. And a lot of the things that we would do similarly here and what we did in the past with those students when they were primarily Zoom students, some of that might actually work. So using the best practices, the flexibility component is probably one of the things that's most questionable. And I think it may really come down to the family. Does the family need to have the student at home, or the fact that the student can't get to the campus? Is that the primary driver? And so then it's a matter of the family being able to commit to making sure that the student is being facilitated, especially at the younger ages. I don't think we can rely on many of those students be very highly independent, motivated learners. So they typically need someone there to facilitate their learning, not being left alone for a couple of hours just to learn, or even just to watch a teacher in the classroom that's on the screen. It doesn't work very well, right? So they need to have that person with them. And so those are some of the things that would come into it. I think it can work, but I don't have any direct experience at that level, and it has to rely more on the motivation of whoever's there locally, typically a parent or a guardian or some caretaker, to be actively engaged with that student. Because students, the younger we get, typically, the more facilitation that is typically required to help them through the learning process. All right, our adults, we can often give them, here's a reading assignment, here's a writing assignment, go do it. Many of them will do that. Younger kids, not so much. And I think we've all kind of lived through that.
Okay,
I'm sorry, I can't say more about that.
We have one more question before we wrap up this morning, coming from Crystal Washington. And she asks, has there been any independent program evaluation to determine the quality of learner outcomes in the HyFlex modality?
Yeah, that's a good question. There have been a lot of evaluations, and there hasn't been a formal evaluation like a national study on any of this. However, here in the HyFlex learning community, I'm just going to show you where this is. There's a bibliography we put together just by searching through the database of all the published literature, especially in education. And this is just searching for HyFlex or hybrid flexible. There are other people who use the same approaches but call it something else. But in this list alone, there's at least 130 studies, and many of these there's at least a half a dozen dissertations, and there's at least a half a dozen master's theses. There are literature reviews, and so there's a lot that's been looked at, and almost all of these are talking about basically what we did, how well students learned, and how satisfied they were. And some of them go into other areas as well, but almost always we're looking at learning outcomes and satisfaction. And in those situations, almost always across the board, students are satisfied and the learning is as good or better than it was before in the single mode class. And usually there's no distinction between the various modes of participation. Now, if you're an educational researcher, that probably shouldn't surprise you very much, because you can understand there's so many other variables that control learning. The mode of participation is just one of the important ones. And so there are other things that are important. What we also find is that when we redesign a course for HyFlex, we often redesign the face-to-face component as well. We make the course better and more engaging across the board. And so it makes some sense that we would get better learning overall, or at least not any worse learning, because we're paying more attention to engagement, to interaction, and to those kinds of things. So yeah, I would say to take a look through this literature list, do some searching. You can search in the topic area you're looking for, maybe the level, but this is graduate level, this is undergraduate level, this is what we call community college or junior college level. I don't know if there's any high school studies in there. I don't remember, but there's research from the U.S., from the Western Hemisphere, but also from the Southern Hemisphere. There's also from Europe and Asia studies as well.
Thank you very much, Professor Beatty, and thank you very much to our attendees for your questions this morning. All right, unfortunately, we are definitely out of time for this section. And at this point in time, rest assured, I hope that your questions that you have shared, many of them have been answered via the other questions that came through the question and answer section. So right now, I pass you back to Dr. Shutt, and as we continue with our third and final presenter for today.
Thank you so much, Professor, for answering those questions. And thank you, exceptional thanks for providing us with the bibliography, with the references for where we can get further information. Who knows? Some of us here might decide to write a paper or to do some research in that area. I really like the fact that we have a whole list that we can look through and look at it against the background of what you have presented. So thank you very much, Professor Beatty. We'll now go to the big man of the day, AI. I call AI the big man of the day. And we're going to have Margaret John telling us all about how we can use it in education. Margaret John is a data scientist in Chicago, and she holds a master's degree in applied mathematics from the University of Illinois at Chicago. She particularly enjoyed her teaching assistant and her experience teaching calculus from all levels. Her field of study was differential equations, which she now uses to help develop novel cancer detection techniques. So over to you, Margaret John.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me. Today I will be talking. Is it all right if I take over control? I don't know if there's another way of presenting. All right. Just double checking that everything's okay. Can everybody see my screen? I think so. During this presentation, feel free to ask questions during it. I'll try to keep an eye on the Q&A chat. But as she said, yes, my name is Margaret John. I am a data scientist in Chicago, and I will be talking to you guys about GAI in education. Making sure that you can see what I am seeing. You cannot. Apologies. Please. Too many programs open at once. Nice.
We can't see you, Margaret.
I know. I'm sorry. Apologies. I'm setting up my slides.
Okay. Love your background.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very inspirational for what's coming.
I promise I work with this every day. All right. Can everybody see my slides?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. So, yes, today we'll talk about GAI in education. Now, you may or may not have heard the term GAI before, but GAI refers to not just the common AI tools that you've heard, but also a whole host of other ones. And we'll get into that as a first topic. Next, we'll talk about some capabilities and limitations of AI in education. We'll talk about some AI content detection tools. So how can you see if your students have been using AI in their work? And finally, we'll wrap up with a demo if my computer cooperates. So what is GAI? GAI refers to generative AI, which is any kind of AI model that can generate content. Previously, we've had AI models that can answer yes or no questions or tell you whether a picture is of a dog or a cat. But now we have tools that can answer open-ended questions, that can write essays, that can develop theses, and do all sorts of crazy things. So let's first start a discussion with a couple examples of GAI writing tools. I'm sure you guys have already heard of ChatGPT. It is an AI-powered chatbot. So you type responses to it and it will write responses back to you. It's free to use for everyone. So there's a free version. All you need to do is give them your email and phone number and they give you an account. Although there is a paid level, which is supposed to be much smarter and more intelligent. In addition to ChatGPT, there's a ton of others as well, including Grammarly, which is specifically for writing. So it is trained to improve your writing skills. Finally, there's GitHub Copilot, which is specifically for coding. So it'll integrate with your coding environment and either write code for you or help you improve what code you're writing. What's important to pay attention to with every tool is what data was used to generate the model. So ChatGPT used parts of the internet, so it's going to have a whole lot of information. It's going to be absolutely massive. It was only possible with a large amount of computing power donated by Microsoft, so gigantic companies, gigantic computers. While something like Grammarly will be trained on a much smaller data set, still absolutely massive. But it is fine-tuned for a specific purpose, and for Grammarly, that purpose is English. Similarly for GitHub Copilot, that specific purpose is coding. So there's different types, different flavors of GAI tools. So what can they do? They can answer open-ended questions, give feedback, fix errors, even their own. ChatGPT has been able to pass the bar exam, the US medical licensing exam, and one of the ways to compare the different versions of ChatGPT is to see how easily it passes a benchmark set of exams. So it is very good at those things. It can be a great place to research a new topic, generate early drafts or papers, or interrogate ideas. But the key skill needed when using generative AI tools is critical thinking. And this brings me to its limitations. Generative AI will never replace human logic, and none of the answers you get out of generative AI are guaranteed to be correct. They can only use information in their training sets, but even the way they use that information is not in a directly logical way. It's much more about the frequency of how words come together in their training set than the actual information contained in their training set. And an understanding of how it's wrong, why it's wrong, or even why it's correct is a very open field of study in AI. When generative AI is incorrect, people often call it hallucinations because its output will sound very correct, but the information will be very wrong. For example, one of the examples I came across was if you asked Bard how many N's there are in banana, it will say there is one N in banana. That's an easy way of, that's something that we can easily verify, but it will be just as confident in a wrong answer as it is with the right answer. And that's something you need to always keep in mind when interacting with generative AI. Now, regardless of its limitations, it is an important tool. It's something that people are using every day. I use it every day in my own work. And there are very good ways to introduce students to it in the classroom. For example, you can have students use ChatGPT to write an argument, but then have students critique that argument in their own words. You could have them use it to generate outline for, say, a paper or an assignment, and then write the rest of the assignment in their own words. Or have students construct an argument and conversely have ChatGPT critique that argument and have them respond to that critique. Regardless of what you do, it's always important to keep in mind when using generative AI in the classroom that students should all have access to the same tools. So as I said before, there's a host of generative AI tools. Each of them will have a slightly different flavor or answer. And it's important that, if you're going to be using Grammarly Go or something like that, that all students have access to the same thing. Next, it's important to make it very clear what is the appropriate use of the tool, what's an inappropriate use of the tool. And finally, it's also important to make sure that no information you want to keep private is ever given to an AI tool. This has much more bearing in the corporate world where you don't want any proprietary information leaking out, but anything you give to an AI tool is saved forever by that company because that information is useful to them. Now, if students are going to use it as a tool, there are going to be some that will abuse it as a tool. So it's important for educators to have an understanding of how to appropriately integrate and appropriately set boundaries on the tool. So when it is impossible or overly difficult to remove access to the internet during an assignment, I'd recommend that you start by explicitly stating the appropriate use of a generative AI tool. Is it okay to write a first draft? Is it okay to use it to make edits or get critiques? And next, it's important to instruct students to save their own paper trails. So with generative AI, it's not often clear when students have used or abused it. And probably the worst way they could use it is if they type the assignment into ChatGPT and copy and paste the answer. Now, one of the only and best ways to make sure they don't do that is if they keep their own evolution of their work. Now, this is useful to them to see how their editing history goes, but it's also very important for instructors because even the best AI detection tools aren't going to be 100% accurate. The only thing you can really trust is document evolution histories to see that students have been putting their best work on into their assignments. And finally, use AI detection tools appropriately. Certainly use them to get a feel for as kind of a filter to see which students' work looks a little suspicious, but don't rely on them entirely because they can be definitely fooled in both directions, as in AI detection tools can flag human work as AI and flag some AI work as human. So it's important when you use them to think about the student as a whole, their assignment history, and again, ask for these paper trails to ensure that they're doing their own work. So as there are as many AI detection tools as there are AI tools, and I have a few outlined here. GPT-0 is probably my favorite because it's free and it has a document upload feature. So you can just batch load all of your students' assignments and get a score for each one. However, I've also found it doesn't always work as well. Originality AI, made by Google, it's the paid version of GPT-0 and can perform better. Content at Scale is also free, but you have to manually copy paste your students' work, which can be time consuming. And Copy Leaks is similar as well. So let's go and
not to interrupt, but we have a participant saying that she's having difficulty hearing the presenter. So if there's anything that the presenter can do to increase her volume, we'd appreciate it. I mean, it's just one person, but we would like everybody to hear because it's such valuable information. Thanks.
Let's see. Probably it's my headphones. I'm gonna disconnect them real quick. Is that better? Oops. All right, can the listeners hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, lovely.
One of the participants was asking if you can return to the previous slide because she missed it. He or she missed it.
Apologies. This one or?
I would think so.
Okay, good. Yes. So yes, here are 4 tools and they're also readily accessible if you just search for AI content detection. These are the top ones. I see we have some raised hands. I wouldn't mind taking some questions now.
So Paulette Rifa, if you wish, go ahead. Okay, I'm not too sure what's happening.
That's okay.
So I guess we could continue. Oh, okay, the person is about to speak. Sorry about that.
Sorry, I was saying that was accidental. I don't have a question.
Okay, no problem.
Sorry. All right, so moving into GPT-0. GPT-0 boasts an accuracy rate exceeding 78%, which is kind of high, but it's also not it's certainly not 100%. So again, rely on external validation, such as version histories or handwritten notes to actually determine whether your students are overutilizing AI sources. Another thing to keep in mind with GPT-0 is that shorter writing samples from children or in other styles, or samples written in languages other than English, have a higher chance of being misclassified. So longer writing samples and more complex writing samples are all much better at being correctly classified. So how can we externally verify? One of the ways is to check the version history of a document. If your students are using Microsoft Word or Google Docs, you can just go to File Version History or File Info Version History and see you can see a little log of every single change they made to that document. And the thing to look for is really large pasted segments. And if you see a large pasted segment, it likely means that they have plagiarized. Obviously, not entirely. They could have pasted from another document that they own, but large pasted segments likely means that they have been plagiarizing. So when you can, try remove access from the internet for assessments. And then when you can't, use AI content detection tools or rely on document history to see if your students have been overutilizing AI sources. But all in all, it's important to focus on the process more than the product of what your students are making. ChatGPT and other AI content or other generative AI tools aren't going away. They're being heavily utilized in the industry now. So it's much better that your students learn how to integrate them into their learning strategy than to completely be independent of them. And finally, give me 1 second and we will run through a quick demo of ChatGPT and some AI detection tools. Okay, so OpenAI is right here in chat.openai.com. And here I have a query that I set up a couple days ago. So I can ask it open-ended questions such as, how can I use your tool in the classroom? And it gives me a pretty long and somewhat well thought out response. It can research topics, it can explain concepts and help you with writing and language learning. Some of them are a little stranger than others. As a virtual guest speaker, I'm not sure how useful this would be. But it is quick, it's responsive, and it's highly informative as well. Now let's see how good a couple of these AI content detection tools are at detecting AI content. We talked earlier about GPT-0. So they have moved some things around. They really made this interesting. Anyway, so here's the paste your text here. What they have outlined here are different tools that you can use for integrating this more seamlessly into your grading workflow. But we'll use this plugin here. And we just take the AI written content. And we can see that this simple query, which is just about 3,000 characters, gets a score of 53% from GPT-0. This means that GPT-0 has answered essentially, I don't know whether this is human or AI. So as you can see, this very straightforward example, this AI content detection tool is unsuccessful at determining the source. Now let's look at some other ones. Okay, so for all of these, that GPT-0, this content at scale, you should make an account, but they're also just free to use independently as well. So I highly doubt you want to be copying and pasting all your students' work in this way. So content at scale gave this a 1% human probability, so highly likely to be AI generated. This means that content at scale was successful at determining that this is an AI generated piece of work. Any questions? So this concludes the bulk of the discussion. I'd like to reiterate that GPT and other generative AI tools have fantastic capabilities, but will take some time for us to learn how to use appropriately. They allow students to gain access to information quickly and easily, but are not always guaranteed to be correct. I would say consider incorporating them directly into your assignments rather than ignoring them altogether, and consider using AI content detection tools to ensure that students are not tempted to plagiarize from human or AI sources. I have some further reading here in these slides if you guys are interested, but thank you for listening to my talk, and I'd like to take some questions.
Thanks so very much. What you call your talk. We enjoyed the presentation. I'm sure most people were glued because everybody wants to know not only what is AI, but where is AI going and how we are going to use it in our classrooms. And I like the presentation because you brought to us what's practical, what's impractical, and what we should be mindful of. For example, the source, the data source that we have. Can we trust it? Personally, when I use Grammarly, sometimes I get so frustrated because I know definitely this is the correct thing. And here is Grammarly telling me they're underlining these little blue things and telling me that's not correct. And, you know, it frustrates you because you're wondering, where am I going wrong? You know, so you explaining that we must be mindful of our data set and where it came from and who did it. So we don't have to accept it. Yes, it pops up, but we can run along with it. But I like that you really, and about misplaced confidence of AI. You know, we should be so careful how much confidence we placed in AI. And I like the link between the previous presentations, because certainly popped into my head what it is doing, like AI versus creativity, AI versus problem solving, AI versus decision making. So we heard all those lovely skills that we are supposed to adapt, be creative, be able to solve problems. And here is AI giving you it on a silver platter. So again, it calls for mental adjustment, and it calls for you looking carefully at what you are doing, because it's like you have to look at the three sides of this coin and not just two. This coin has three sides, definitely. So we need to look at that when we are going forward in using. And you also pointed out that it's inevitable. We cannot get away from it. So we ought to understand it. I mean, I really enjoyed that presentation. And I'm sure that many people put questions for Anderson. Anderson, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Shutt. And thank you very much, Mrs. John, for your your presentation this morning. Okay, so we do have a few questions for you. The first one comes from Roxana Pamphlet. And she is asking, she's making a statement that there's a global concern of AI replacing teachers in the future. So she's asking for your opinion on this at this point in time.
So teachers fill a specific role that's very much outside of the capabilities of ChatGPT. I'd say a heavily motivated learner could replace, in the same way the internet did not replace teachers, I don't believe that generative AI will replace teachers as well. I think any kind of learner who could have used the internet to replace a teacher could use GAI to replace a teacher, but the converse is not true. Does that make sense? So I'm not worried just because teachers do a lot more than GAI could ever do.
And I will just add to what you said. I mean, I think the human touch could never compensate for a computer. Am I correct?
Yes. And I mean, for better or worse, I've actually had fights with my ChatGPT before, but it is fundamentally not human.
Oh, okay. All right. So I have another question coming from Judy Wong, and she's asking, can ChatGPT, for example, be included in a bibliography of a paper or a presentation?
That's a very good question. I would say yes, it's a good idea to cite that source, but in another way, I would say you shouldn't, because the information you get from ChatGPT should only point you in a direction. If you are citing something in a bibliography, it should be the source of the information that you used, and ChatGPT should never be that. Generative AI should never be that. You can kind of think of it as a way to you give it some facts, it'll shake them up around and maybe give it to you in a better order for you to see, like rearrange the letters on your Scrabble ticket, but it shouldn't ever give you like ground truth that you move from for any of your arguments or any of your papers. So yes and no.
Okay, thank you. I hope that answers your question. So I am seeing another one here coming from Bernard Richardson. And he's asking, plagiarism and copywriting are two major issues concerned at this point in time. All right, and critical thinking is also seen as a major part of developing an individual. So how authentic, so the question is, how authentic is one's work when we use AI, seeing that they're basically using information that has been programmed or encrypted?
That's a good question. So the critical thinking is necessary when interacting with ChatGPT. I think ChatGPT is going to make it incredibly easy for people to remove critical thinking from their lives, but they should and will run into problems with it, because I mean, in my own experience with ChatGPT, I'll use it often to start projects that I don't have a large background in, but it often fails. And when it fails, you have to be able to have the outlying understanding to, push it from. What it all comes down to is the kind of products that ChatGPT gives you are not, they're still not as good as what a human can make. The writing style that it writes in is typically a lot more simplistic. Its arguments can be a lot more flat, even as fantastic as it is for a computer to be able to write an argument. That argument isn't the work of a human mind, in that it doesn't display fundamentally logic. So I think that it can be used by people to plagiarize and copyright and take shortcuts in their lives, but if it's used correctly, it can free up their time for better tasks. And I think it is fundamentally authentic, your work, even if you do use a tool. You need to just think of it as a tool and not as someone who's thinking for you.
And what other forms of AI can we integrate into our teaching?
Yeah, so ChatGPT is the one I'm most familiar with, but generative AI expands to images and other things as well. Not sure how to use Photoshop AI in your classroom, but there are a couple very good examples, aside from the few here, where you can use some text-based AI like ChatGPT to kind of play off of yourself and use it almost as an automatic tutor. But yeah, that's a good question.
All right,
I
thank
think it
you.
depends on the classroom itself.
Good. So I'm just reminding all attendees, you are more than welcome to place your questions in the question and answer section, and we will try our best to answer as many as we can during the course of this morning. All right, so as we continue, a question comes from Denise, and Denise is asking, could detection of the use of AI be disabled by students? And if so, what tool could be used to counteract that?
Yes, so AI and AI detection tools are in a bit of an arms race, right? Every time the generative AI tools get better, the detection AIs have to also get better. And so it is kind of a fight. Now, I think especially with having students save a paper trail, this is the way to make the use of AI so cumbersome that it's ultimately not worth it. But there are obviously ways to circumvent it. For example, students could write their own work and then have AI improve it. And ultimately, that if the student is writing their own work, then that's most of the issue down already. The goal in, honestly, it will be very difficult to remove AI tools entirely from your students' work unless you're having them do it completely online. But the goal is to have them do enough of their work.
Okay, thank you. All right, so the others are more comments in terms of your presentation. So persons are complimenting you, Mrs. John, on your presentation as well. And they are really appreciative of the work that you have shared with us this morning. All right, I am asking, I'm not seeing any other questions at this point in time. So I'm asking if anybody has any questions, feel free and let us know at this point in time.
Anderson, we
I
have
have
a
one.
question. Sorry, Dr. Shutt, we have a
You go ahead,
question in the
yes.
Q&A from Dirk.
Yes.
Oh, okay, I'm now scrolling. Okay, good. All right, so there's another one with regards to, from Dirk, asking, do you have any trepidation that a programmer may make the tool become less robotic and make writing a little imperfect in the future?
Yes, so there's always, I mean, even the fact that ChatGPT is as good as it is right now is an absolute feat that nobody thought would be coming in the next, you know, for the next 50, 60 years. And there will always be improvements, but even what I've found in using AI in my day-to-day, it's very good at certain things. And I think that we're coming to a point where we're finding out the limits of what it's very good at. I don't think that we'll be able to make an AI that completely mimics a human. We've gotten very far, frighteningly far. But even the tools that you see now are running on hyper-specialized machines that are like a couple thousand of your computers all stacked together and working in harmony. But yeah, it will improve, and maybe it will be able to replace writing, and then you guys are going to have a very difficult question to answer.
Okay, so thank you very much, Mrs. John. I'm not seeing any other questions at this point in time. So I just want to say thank you so much.
Anderson, there's one question.
The question was answered. What other forms of AI?
Okay, it was answered.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, that was answered before. All right. All right. So again, thank you very much.
Sorry, Anderson. Wahida on the Rhine has a question. What percentage? I don't think we address one?
I'm not seeing
If you
it.
scroll down, if you scroll right to the end of the Q&A.
Oh, okay. Apparently that was just shared. Okay. Okay, so another question.
That's
What
3 minutes
percentage?
spirit.
Okay, so what percentage of the students work using AI tools in their writing is acceptable?
So that's a good question, and it depends on the individual assignment, but I think that the core ideas and the core communications should always be the student's own work. Also, the responsibility for exactly what is said should be the student's own work. But personally, I would think that certain steps, such as generating a first draft of an outline. So you should be able to tell ChatGPT, this is my main argument. This is what I want to say. Can you generate an outline for me? And then moving from that outline to fully fleshed out paragraphs using your own work, I think would be appropriate. But again, that is up to the individual teacher, not only to determine that, but also to explain to your students clearly what is appropriate and what isn't.
Okay, thank you. Checking, is making sure, and thank you very much to Alicia and Freddie for giving me those other questions I may have missed. I'm looking to see if there's any others. Okay, Yvette, I'm not too sure if this question applies to the current current program, which you're asking about if you have a master's program in another area. All right. Oh, okay. I get it. I just saw it. Thank you. All right. Okay. I don't think there are any others. So, and I mean, Kanisha's, your question was also answered already. So I would say thank you very much to Mrs. John, and I pass you back to Dr. Shah.
Would it be rude if I ask a question? I just wanted to ask Mrs. John one final thing about the language issue. I'm concerned about it because we live in a multicultural, multilingual world. And so do you know what has been done to alleviate the language issues? Because people who speak mother tongue and have to be degree in another language is extremely difficult. So do you know whether or not something has been done to
Yes,
address
actually. So I know that there
issues?
are versions of generative AI tools that are specifically trained to have a more diverse input set as far as language goes. So being much better at questions and answers in Spanish, and similarly detection tools as well, being better at accepting and understanding other languages as well. Although English is the most common one, there certainly are other tools, and I believe at least one of the AI content detection tools is specified for multiple languages. Yes, CopyLeaks is supports multiple languages.
Okay. Thank you very much, and I must thank you for that excellent presentation. And as expected, a presentation of this nature would generate a lot of questions, and because there's so much to ask, about it. But we have to bear in mind that we, as educators, have to be knowledgeable about what's here and what we have to use. And it also means that we also have to keep abreast of what's happening so that when students come to us with questions, we are able to guide them in the right direction if we ourselves are unable to answer. So I think that was an excellent presentation, and I really, really appreciate it. And thank you on behalf of all the participants, on behalf of CVE. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I would just like to remind everybody about to check out, please, our website, our Facebook page, and YouTube. And our email too is placed in the chat. I think it's our email. So please, participants, please don't forget to check us out. And if you're not yet a member of CVE, consider it, please. Please consider it. Before we go into our final section, I just want to remind all participants that we would appreciate if you would complete your evaluation form before you leave. We would really like to have your feedback. Would really like to have your feedback. So please look for your, I think, yes, it's in the chat.
Yes, Dr. Schott, we put it in the chat. It's there.
Yes, it's in the chat. So please, every participant, before we go to our final section, get to the chat, get your feedback form, and let us know what you think. It will help us a great deal to improve what we are doing and to know our next move and where we go from here. So thank you for filling out the feedback form.
Dr. Shah, just before you introduce the next section, pardon my interruption, everyone, but I just wanted to address the issue of the certificates for participants. It came up, it has been coming up online, and we've been responding. We at the Executive of Caribbean Visionary Educators, we've made a decision on it in terms of going forward, we would think about giving certificates. We are currently working on the logistics and the parameters within which we could do so. And after hearing that micro-credentialing session this morning, I'm sure you all would appreciate that certificates hold meaning, and they tend to be linked to some form of assessment, as it were. And because we are a responsible foundation, we will, of course, follow whatever educational practice, established practice and ethical practice as well. So we do have it under consideration. And so in the future, keep checking our website, and we will also email to communicate with you what we will do in terms of certificates going forward and how we will organize or reorganize, those issues around the certificates. So just keep your eyes out, but we are listening. I also wanted to just make the point to participants about the value we place on you, because we have such a responsible, astute group of thinkers who are CVE members. I really would like you to just give yourselves a round of applause. The quality, and we are always blown away, to use a colloquial term, and always impressed by the quality of our participants in terms of their levels of understanding and expression. If you notice the quality of comments and questions in our chats and our Q&A, and it's something of value, and we really want to applaud it, because this is really fulfilling one of the goals of the Caribbean Visionary Educators, to raise the quality of interaction and discussion among educators. So, it really is achieving a goal. So I just wanted to raise that point before we leave. Again, I also want to remind you, please fill out the feedback forms, because this is what helps us prepare for future activities, future professional learning, and so on. So we would really appreciate you, and we listen. Usually when we have these sessions, we listen. The feedback, we listen to the feedback given in these sessions. So we really want to implore you to make sure that you fill out your forms. The links are there in the chat. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Dr. Freddie. And now we will ask, we call on Charmaine Richardson to give us a thank you. And to close today's session.
We have two hands up, Dr. Schutz. I don't know if they are old hands or if they are
cannot see them.
questions before we close. Nikita Walker. So Nikita, you could go ahead. And then Sonia Waldron.
Okay.
Nikita. Okay.
I do not have the gallery view, so I cannot see the hand.
So Sonia Waldron, do you have a question or it's an old hand? Okay, so it might be an old hand. So, well, I'm seeing another hand. Ollie Pereira. Ollie, you can go ahead.
Hello?
Right.
All right, thank you. I was just wondering, for the last question on the survey that you had, it asked about being a CVE member. What does being a member entail, please?
Okay, to become a member, you simply go to our website, and when you click on the link for the website, it will open up a page that will ask you to subscribe. And all you have to do is to subscribe, put in some information, your email address, and so on, and you will become a member.
What does a member have to do, or you know?
Well, you could put posts on our website. We have a number of resources on the website. Perhaps we could do a demo of the website. I don't know if you could pull it up, Alicia, so as I speak, we could see.
One moment, please.
We have resources for different levels of educators. We have for primary school persons, secondary school, we have for principals. We have also on that website, you would get notice of our different events, different activities. So this is what it will look like when you open the page. This is the front page. And if you look at the different ribbons at the top, you would see, well, we have teaching. Under teaching, you have general teaching, teaching strategies. We have resources, because that's one of our key goals, to provide, and these are indigenous Caribbean materials. So, and you could send in materials to us to post up. Of course, it goes through a vetting process. So if you have a lesson plan that you find is very exciting and useful, you've seen benefits. If you have a strategy that is working and you want to share it, you can do so. Send it to us and we would post it on our website. So we have different things. We have action research, we have technology and innovation, and more. We have videos on our website that will show, like, for example, clinical supervision in taking place and how to conduct clinical supervision, examples that can be used in teaching. And the point is, one thing to note is that in those videos, for example, they would not be perfect. So it allows for critical examination and evaluation and assessment of the videos, what works, what didn't work, what was right, what may not have, what could be improved, and that kind of thing. So it's worth going on to our website and just doing a little exploration. You also have information on for teachers in Trinidad and Tobago. We haven't populated it with that information from other countries, but if you have that information, like if we have people from ministries there who can send it to us, information like job specifications for heads of departments, job specification for deans, and that kind of thing. So it's also, the website also is a research space. You can go onto our website and do some research if you want, because we do have materials that are useful. That was a very good question, Ollie. I'm glad I caught you. I'm seeing Sonia. Sonia, I realized I didn't allow you to talk, so I don't know if there's a question. I just clicked allow to talk, so I don't know if that hand is just up from before.
There's a question, Dr. Freddie, about fees.
Right, so that's the wonderful thing about CVE. It's absolutely free. Membership is absolutely free. And I'm very happy and proud to say that so far, for the 3 years of our existence, all our activities have been free because we've been able to partner with our participants. How long we'll be able to maintain that, I cannot see. But for now, all of our activities have been free and our membership is free. Right, so if there are no other questions, I'm going to turn back over to the chair. And again, it was really lovely this day of
I'm seeing 2 hands raised. I'm not sure. I do not have the gallery view, so I'm not seeing the
I'm
raised
seeing
hands.
2 hands, yes. Judy Wong.
Yes, three participants raised hands.
Judy Wong and Kenisha.
Hi, good day.
Mm-hmm.
I came in a bit late on the webinar. I did not see the link until after it began and registered and joined. So I missed, I think from the questionnaire, it was 2 presenters. The first, there were 4, were there 4 presenters?
Yes.
Okay, so I missed the first 2. I'm wondering if the recording, if it was recorded and we can still access the presentation in any one of your media.
Yes, you can go, and we've been putting it in the chat. You can go to our YouTube channel,
Okay.
like about sometime next week, because we would need to do some editing before we post up the videos. So,
Okay.
or we will email you and let you know when it's available on our YouTube channel. I'll put the link here in our chat so you could go on, because past activities that we've had, past webinars and so are on, and you can go. So make sure you subscribe to our channel as well, so you would get notifications.
Okay, thank you.
You're most welcome. So Kenisha Williamson.
Okay, thank you. I joined a bit late as well because there's a time difference between Trinidad and Jamaica. I almost left the meeting at first because I thought that what was being done was geared towards teachers from Trinidad and Tobago. And then I waited a little and saw the presentation on HiFlex, and then I stayed. I don't know if this was discussed at the beginning of the meeting, but I want to ask, who started CVE? Is this an independent group? Who are the organizers or the persons behind it? I just want to understand what I'm affiliated with. Thank you.
Right. Kenisha, can I ask you if you are a member of Caribbean Visionary Educators?
No, I saw
Go
this.
to our website and subscribe. Okay.
Okay.
So you should go to our website and subscribe and become a member. Now, Caribbean Visionary Educators, if we go back to our just our website, maybe we should do a webinar on just who we are. You're giving us some very good ideas, but Alicia, if you could pull it back up. So we have an executive team comprised of 3 directors. Myself, so this is Freddie James, Alicia Messiah, and Jonathan Labari. Now, we formed, all of us are educators or stakeholders in education. So we have on the website, we have a bit about us as the team, and we were we are all educators at different levels. I, for example, am a university lecturer. Alicia is a secondary school teacher. Jonathan is a secondary school teacher. We have members, executive members from different countries. Dr. Shutt, for example, is originally from Montserrat. She's currently working and living in the UK. We have Cecile Minot, and Cecile is Jamaican. She's unable to be here because she had to travel for she had to travel. So, and then we have Dr. Viola Rue, who is Guyanese. So that is the makeup of CVE, but please go to our website. I'll put the website link in the chat. We have put it before, but I'll put it, and it's absolutely free to join. We have areas where members can post, and that's one area we would really like to get people putting up posts more. Tell us about what you are doing. Share with the community, because essentially CVE is a professional learning community. So thanks for that question, but it means we probably should do a webinar or something that would just talk about who we are. So I'm going to turn back over to the chair.
Thanks, Dr. Freddie. That information was really useful. And I hope Kanisha and all others who not too sure, do check the website, go through it, and you will understand a lot better what CVE is all about and what makes us tick. I must say we had a very good day, but I'm going to allow Charmaine Richardson to now join us to give us her summary of the day and her thanks. Over to you, Charmaine.
Thank you, Dr. Shutt. And I would like to thank everybody who have been able to remain with us to the conclusion of the program. We did have a wonderful, enlightening day. And really and truly, when you think about what happened today, it sort of gives us the perspective that we have to take a reality check, take stock of ourselves as educators, who we are and what we're about. So the program began this morning with Mrs. Jennifer Doyle, an educator for over 50 years. And she helped us share that we really need to see ourselves
Charmaine?
We have to ensure that we are keeping our students or education system relevant to our learners. So it means, therefore, as professionals, we need to be thinking about the future. We have to retool ourselves and recognize that we have to move along with the way the world is going. So that was a wonderful beginning of our program today. Next came Mrs. Joseph, and she did a wonderful session, the micro-credentialing, because many teachers, we recognize the importance of continuous learning. So it's not just about our students learning, but we have to continue to learn, and we want to ensure that our learning is truly relevant. But it's not simply about just jumping into doing various short courses and so on. We have to ensure that we think about the quality of what we are doing and see how best it's focused on not just about us, but about the collaboration that we need to engage in so that we could all benefit our students. It's about community building. So teamwork, collaboration is highly important, even the mentorship among ourselves as we improve ourselves. So teachers don't just look to jump into doing courses and courses and courses just to see if you could get a certificate to make you look good, but you need to think about the quality of what you're doing, how relevant it is going to be for your learning, because we really want at the end of the day that everything you engage in adds value to our students. Next, we had a wonderful discourse by Mr. Professor Brian Beatty. Now, the high flex classroom, for me, I couldn't understand how we could keep it relevant post-pandemic. But it helps us to recognize that we all need to keep an open mind. We all need to consider what are the outcomes we are hoping to achieve. And really and truly, whether the child is in front of us in the classroom or whether they are benefiting from the program synchronously or asynchronously, are we meeting the needs of our students? That is a question we need to think about. So as educators, we need to be open-minded, consider not what we cannot do and what we do not have, but we need to open our minds to think about how we could engage our students better and have an open mind as to whether or not this HyFlex, this hybrid system of learning, HyFlex, how can we make it relevant in our situation? So yes, it may take some time, but as you said, much time and effort is needed in the beginning of the process, but as you get it developed, it can really work to benefit our students. Because really and truly, if you go to teach a class and there's nobody present, it defeats the purpose of all your preparation. But if whatever was prepared, our students are able to reach it and access the information, I think that is what would make us truly successful as educators. So that is why the HyFlex learning is something that we should really keep in mind and see how we might be able to implement such a program in our education system, in our way of teaching. And then we had this wonderful session. Ms. Margaret John, she helped us to appreciate that generative artificial intelligence is here. It's not something that we could run away from. It is here. For those of us who are in secondary schools and tertiary level education systems, we recognize that with such technology, it might be challenging for us to really authenticate the work of our students. So we cannot bury our heads in the sand and feel that it doesn't exist and we could hide from it. We have to recognize that these tools are here. We should try to see how best we could use them. We could integrate them in our teaching and learning as far as is possible. But at the same time, we should not allow ourselves to be duped by the misuse of the technology. So again, open our minds, open our eyes, get with the program, see what is there, and we need to continue as 21st century educators, retool, get the skills that are necessary so that we could continue to be relevant in the lives of our students. So that is the summary of what happened today. By no way were my few words here enough to refresh your minds about all that you all benefited from. So again, I'm encouraging you all, tune in to our YouTube channel. Probably by next week, you'll be able to see the program again and be able to benefit from the many, many different points. Tomorrow, however, we have another very, very engaging program. As you all recognize, the world we're living in seems to be very, very crazy. Those of us who have to interact with students in the classes, we recognize that there's not the homes that we come from may not be the homes the students come from. The lives and the values that we have may not be the lives and the values our students have. So we have to recognize that there are challenges that we all may have to face. So tomorrow promises to be another equally engaging program. You really should not miss it, especially if you're in administration, you're working as a dean and so on. So the theme of the program for tomorrow is confronting school violence, a solution-focused approach. We encourage you all, be present for that session. It's not about us throwing our arms up in the air saying that there's nothing that could be done. but we are going to work together to share ideas as to how we could face the challenges and what solutions we're going to share, all the best practices that we could share within the limited time. So please be here. At this time, I would like to thank all of our capable presenters for the work that they have done with us today. Special thanks to Mrs. Jennifer Doyle, let me do it in order. Mrs. Jennifer Doyle, Mrs. Shirma Joseph, Mr. Brian Beatty, and Mrs. Margaret John. You all represented well. We thank you so very much for your presentations. And we also like to thank our chairperson for the day, Ms. Dr. Gertrude Schott, Dr. Freddie James, Mr. Anderson Labari, Ms. Alicia Messiah in the background, and every one of you participants who came, you listened, you learned, you asked questions, and we look forward to hearing from you. We encourage you all to ensure that you fill out the feedback form so that we could continue to improve in our efforts to serve you much better as the Caribbean Visionary Educators. Thank you all so much for tuning in today.
Thank you so much, Charmaine, for that comprehensive analysis of the day's event. I noticed that you got some hearts. You didn't only get claps, but you got some hearts. So well done. Well done to everybody. And that nicely brings us to the close of day one. And like Charmaine said, we are looking forward for day two tomorrow. And we hope to see every one of you here back tomorrow. Dr. Freddie, do you want to have a final word?
Thanks, Dr. Schott. My final word, again, would be to say thank you for being a very responsible and high quality set of participants, set of educators and education stakeholders. I would also like to ask Roxanne Craig, if she has a question, if, persons would be allowed to leave, could leave, and Roxanne Craig Clark, if you need us to help you with something, if you could remain, and we will do so online with you. But thanks a lot again, and we're looking forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Tomorrow will be lit. It's just gonna be off the chain, so you don't want to miss it.